morning, everyone, and welcome to the Avocado Gamescast, the Avocado's gaming podcast. If it's not morning when you're listening to this, remember, it's always morning somewhere, and you should go to that place. On this episode, we're going to be talking about Baldur's Gate 3, collectible card games, some recent indies, and the upcoming fall deluge. But before we get to that, let's introduce ourselves. I'm, as always, Merve, and joining me today, first up, he always rolls with advantage, it's the Kappa.
Hey, I like
And,
that.
oh yeah. And last but not least, she's been snapping and tapping for as long as she can remember. Give a warm welcome to the singing, winging, amazing Wasp!
Hey.
I Floop. Hello.
Like Advantage is one of those like D&D things I just did not get till I really started to play Baldur's Gate. I think there's going to be a whole like slew of those types of things. Like I didn't get this until I started playing the game with Baldur's Gate, but Advantage was so confusing to me. And then I was like, oh, now I get it. Like, yeah, I'm in a better position than this thing. It makes sense now.
Advantage
initially,
is
I
when
was-
you roll twice and take the better of the two rolls, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then like, but like it when you get like a rogue build or anything like a stabby build or anything where like a miss waste your whole turn, not having advantage feels so crappy. And then when you start to like finally get advantage, you're like, oh, this is great. I need this all the time.
So I think my introduction for you is pretty apt.
Yeah. Yeah.
And-
That's why I liked it.
Wasp, it's great to finally have you on the podcast. We've been trying to get you here for a while. You're going to tell us all about collectible card games a little bit, I assume.
I've been playing them since, I don't know what I started with, either Pokemon Go, Pokemon trading card game online, or Hearthstone. But since then, I've just been playing any one that looks interesting.
Did you grow up with the original Pokemon TCG, like with the physical cards, or is that a little before your time?
So, Pokemon and me are the exact same age, both around fall of '95 or something. So.
Oh, okay, cool.
I grew up and kids collected them, although Yu-Gi-Oh was the schoolyard king. But I didn't play any games until high school when I had a smart device and Hearthstone was out, and I was like, "This sounds good," and I like Warcraft, so.
I'm trying to think of like Magic was the big one, I think, for my generation. With my kids, they've really never been into the game part of the cards, but they like collecting them, which I think is interesting. But I don't know, like it was mostly Magic, I think, when I was in school. When it was Yu-Gi-Oh's like big time to shine? Mid 2000s?
Yeah, early
Yeah.
mid 2000s.
Early mid 2000s, though, it should be said Yu-Gi-Oh is the one of the big three. So with Pokemon, Magic, they're always relevant in the scene. So
What is like? So are people playing Pokemon or collecting the cards these days? Like
Both.
when I see it on like real. Okay,
Yeah.
I had no idea.
So what's annoying is for me when I go to buy them so I can get a physical collection started, scalpers have already rushed off with whole stores worth of boxes to then sell online. So right
still-
now it's scalpers in the secondary market.
I still think about. I went to Target probably. I don't know, like maybe 2 months ago, and this woman just stopped me in the aisle and she's like, "Just so you know, we're not selling any boxed Pokemon cards today." I'm like, okay. It's like, I didn't.
Did you
even
look
ask.
like a Pokemon
No.
master or something?
I don't know. I was literally just browsing around in the toy section, and like I must have looked like I was like, oh, look at this guy. He's here for the Pokemons. She stopped me.
You just got
Look at that. I
you got
still think
scalper
about it.
vibes.
I'm like, what? Like,
Oh man.
I don't know. Like, I'm because she was even saying like people have been like stalking and like waiting in the store and all this other stuff. Like I guess waiting for them to put them out. And I was like, well, that's not me. I'm not here for that. I was actually looking at the Legos, but no, it was very odd though. I still think about that. Like, oh man, I got that look to me. I guess adult Pokemon.
Adult Pokemon
Like,
fan vibes.
Yeah. I was like, oh no, that's not what I was going for.
Those can be good vibes to have.
No, I'm nothing against it, but like, just like, like she kind of came up to me in like a half gallop. Like it wasn't like a nice like. It's like, get him out of here. I still think about it.
Security.
Yeah, he's back.
The scalper has returned.
So, yeah, that's my Pokemon story. But
The card game that like my middle school friends were into was Imagination. I have no idea what happened to that one, but it was around back then, and I was kind of interested in it, but like, yeah, never really took off with me. But what happened? Sorry, go ahead.
No, I don't know when. Look, what's the ideal age range you think for card games? Like for kids to get into, like the rules aren't too complex where they don't.
11
They
to
can
15.
figure it out. Oh, yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just
For Pokemon, I'd say 8-year-olds can start it. For Magic, I'd probably bump it up to 11 or something. But
oh, look, I'm the only one who plays Pokemon. I'm just pulling numbers out of my ass.
No, I think you're about right. I mean, I think Magic is considered a little more hardcore. I think, right?
Yeah.
Like as far as like the rules and stuff, and plus it's more expensive, so that's probably a big part of it with kids, getting into it and stuff.
Speaking of things that are expensive in the sense that they cost me $79.99 Canadian plus tax, Pikmin 4.
Yeah.
So this has been a really interesting game for me. It's my first Pikmin game. Never played a Pikmin game before. It is, for those who don't know, essentially a cross between an action-adventure game and an RTS. But I see it kind of as like almost Nintendo's take on the Ubisoft formula. Like the
I like
Ubisoft
that. Yeah.
open world, like you've got a map, there are a bunch of icons on the map, you go exploring and like little dungeons and other things that are on
Never
the
thought
map.
about that before.
But that's like effectively what it is. Instead of one big open world, it's more like the old school Assassin's Creeds, like AC2, where there are a bunch of interconnected maps. But yeah, that's essentially what it is. You're an explorer who crash lands on a planet called PNF 404 that looks suspiciously like Earth, and your goal is to rescue other castaways and crash survivors. And in order to do that, you need to gather resources so you can explore further and detect more castaways and survivors. I'm not very far into the game yet. This game apparently has a day-night cycle, and I've only seen the day part of the cycle because the night part doesn't come in till later. But I'm enjoying it a lot so far. It's got a really addictive gameplay loop.
Yeah.
You're going out there, gathering resources, making incremental upgrades to your equipment. There's some light survival elements in there, and of course the stars of the show are the adorable little titular characters, the little Pikmin. They're a lot of fun to use. I love the sound effects they make when you just throw them at enemies. By the way, I love that instead of like a lot of RTSs, you're just like clicking deploy unit and then it trundles over there. No, you're just like throwing your units at enemies.
Flop them out there.
It's so wonderfully tactile. I love it. And the other thing I've mentioned about this is that it's a beautiful game. Like, to the point where I'm shocked it runs on the Switch. Like, it shouldn't look this good on hardware this bad. But it runs like a dream. So, I mean, this is what, like, 10 years of polish will do a game, right?
Oh, yeah. It was due out a long time ago, right?
Yeah. I think they've had this one on the shelf for a while. And they probably just used it to fill in a hole on the schedule. So, yeah, it's polished to a diamond sheen. It works fantastically. I'm having a great time with it. Wasp,
Now,
sorry, go ahead.
I was going to ask, how are you dealing with the mechanics of Pikmin? Do you feel it's intuitive, or do you feel like you're like having to look back a lot about what units do what, or like because I grew up with Pikmin, so I don't really know how like a new player would feel with some of those mechanics feel a little bit odd, you know.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Is it intuitive to you? What's your thinking on that?
So the actual like individual powers of each Pikmin are super intuitive because they're like
Okay.
color coded, right?
Right.
So ice Pikmin are going to freeze things. Blue Pikmin are water Pikmin. They can swim. Red Pikmin are aggressive and can tolerate fire. Like that's all super intuitive. But what took me a while to catch on to was what kinds of things will your Pikmin automatically do and what do you have to tell them to do.
What do you got? Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Because
That's how I should have phrased it. I think that's a really good way to put it.
like it took me a while to get used to the fact that if was a resource there and I wasn't like automatically commanding them to do otherwise, they would grab that resource and drag it back to
Yep.
base.
And then die on their way back, right?
Generally, they're pretty good at not dying on their way back, but I'm pretty early
Okay.
because they'll go back from the route where you came generally, and that route should be in general safe. So they're pretty good at not doing that, but sometimes if you got to a place via a route that Pikmin can't go back by, then they'll try to take an alternate route, and that alternate route might be dangerous. So sometimes you have to command them, don't do this, don't grab that treasure, don't grab that enemy's corpse, just keep it there, and we'll get it back later. So it took me a while to kind of get used to that, where essentially I'm canceling actions
Right,
rather than
yeah.
giving them. So yeah, that is a little
Overlord,
awkward.
which is obviously the clone of Pikmin. I think you used to slap them. I always like that. Like if they were doing the wrong thing, you give them a smack and they drop whatever they were doing. So
Yeah, here you give them a whistle, and then
Yeah,
they start
there you
listening to you.
yeah, it's a little bit nicer in the Nintendo version.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of like pretty dark humor in Pikmin. Like this is post-apocalyptic Earth. Everyone's dead.
Yeah, I always forget that about Pikmin. Actually, that it's post-apocalyptic. I always thought it was like survival at first, but no, yes, it is.
So yeah,
In
there's
that
a lot.
first game straight up had a time limit, and then you would just horribly die if you didn't get your ship fixed in a month or something.
Yeah, yeah, a 30-day time limit.
3 days, yeah.
Yeah, Pikmin 4 has no overall time limit, but it has an in-day time limit. So you have to be very careful about how you manage things within each day, so that you're not like caught stranded out when time runs out. But that being said, you could play really conservatively. It would just be a lot less fun because then you'd be going through extra day cycles, and then like having to you'd be losing exploration time and having to re-explore from the same locales. So
I think it's got to kind of feel good for Nintendo too, just to kind of get something out there, huh? I mean, I know Zelda was recent, but there's just Pikmin's been in rumors for how long now? Years and years and years, right? So I feel like
it was
sometimes,
announced, in fact, a very long time ago, and then they just didn't give it a release date.
yeah, yeah. But I know they're trying to get some of that stuff out that's just been announced, like that Metro game that I don't think ever's gonna but it's like I guess it's good that they're finally kind of delivering on some of that stuff, because I do think that people are starting to see the Switch lifespan kind of on that downside now, and
Yeah.
a lot of those little like, hey, this is coming. It's good to see some of those, I think, now, rather than just being like a rumor, or hey, they showed this video or something like that. So good for that. But Pikmin, I think, is a game that deserves, like, it probably has a decent sized fan base. You just don't hear about a lot. Kind of like how Animal Crossing was.
Up until it exploded.
Yeah, up until COVID, and Animal Crossing had like the perfect like link up. But yeah, I've always enjoyed it. I always thought it was more of like a little kind of specific to like a category thing, but it's been getting pretty universal acclaim. So
Yeah, it's been one of those things where it's not that many people are talking about it compared to other big releases, but it's gotten pretty like very strong reviews across the board. It's also done pretty well. Like, it's not a smash hit, but it's done pretty well. It's done better than any of the other Pikmin games in terms of sales. And I really think it would be in the Game of the Year conversation, were this not the same year that Tears of the Kingdom, Baldur's Gate 3, and Starfield came out.
Yeah, this is going to be a rough year.
It's going to be a bloodbath. But I think
still sitting there too.
Yeah, I think this will do well in maybe like strategy categories at year's end, because it is just a really fantastically well-made game. And like, I say this as someone who's been like pretty hot and cold on a lot of Nintendo stuff, but this is one thing that I think they've really nailed. So yeah, good on them for getting Pikmin 4 out the door. Wasp, my understanding is that you've also been playing Nintendo games, but much older ones.
Yeah, so Nintendo Switch Online on their Game Boy service, they dropped Capcom's first two Zelda games, Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages, I think last month. Around the time Tears of the Kingdom came out, to capitalize on it, I'm sure. And I just started playing Ages about a month ago, and it's probably my second favorite Zelda game after Breath of the Wild now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's impressive.
I'm just partially because I bounced hard off of Ocarina of Time. I was like, ooh, I'm not feeling this, but
it's interesting because those are kind of the forgotten Zeldas still, right? Except the Philips ones, which are still the meme machines, right? But that was kind of an interesting take, because I haven't seen, like, I don't want to say like love for it. I just haven't seen a lot of people who have, put it up there in that top tier of them, more like, yeah, I played it, but that's interesting. I've always been interested. I never actually played them, but I think it was hard to get a hold of them for a long time, right? And then I don't know what they changed about it. Capcom's always kind of weird. They do seem to have like their times when they put everything out in a easy to get format, and then other times where it's just like, yeah, good luck finding it.
Yeah, Capcom, I think, I don't know whether like where all the rights for this lay, whether Capcom had to approve something before Nintendo could put it on their service. But yeah, it seems like it took a while for them to really get this out the door and get people playing.
Has it been released for anything before?
Like, has it been a virtual console thing?
That's what I was gonna ask. I haven't kept up with virtual console at all.
They were on the 3DS virtual console, I'm sure, because they dumped a whole bunch of Game Boy Advance and Game Boy Color games on there. But they haven't been in a readily accessible form since 2001, where you could buy the duology in stores.
Okay. That's like a couple other Capcom games until they really started getting into the whole re-release cycle that they're in now. So makes sense. Part of Capcom's, I think, little ID right now. You know what kind of reminds me of with Capcom sometimes is like the Disney Vault. Remember when that was a thing? They released the movie and it's going back in the vault. Like, it always felt like Capcom would kind of like pick and choose what they did release and for what systems and stuff. I thought that was kind of an interesting way to do things, but doesn't surprise me that they took their time waiting for a nice new shiny Zelda release to get it out the door.
Yeah, get that mind share on it. So what are you appreciating about Oracle of Ages?
Right now, I'm mostly impressed at how much game is in here for a Game Boy Color title, which, I mean, I don't know, I was a kid, like a little kid, like too young for video games during the Color's heyday. So maybe I'm wrong. And
Color, you must have grown up on the Advance.
Yeah, I grew up on the Advance. Yeah, so the Minish Cap was my first Zelda game, and that's still one of my favorites, but
Game Boy Color, though, kind of had a slimmer band of being the console or being the Game Boy of choice, right? Like, it was like, 2000, like 2000 to like maybe 2003, right? It was a very short window, right?
When the Game Boy Color came out?
Yeah.
It came out before that. The
The
Game
Game
Boy.
Boy Color was a 1998 release.
Yeah, here you
Yeah.
go.
So it's
And
98 to
Advance was
2001.
like 2000. Okay, yeah, that's pretty short.
Yeah.
For, I mean, because they kept support going on for Advance for damn ever, right? Like they were building in. Was it Advance that, or was it 3DS that had Advance slots, or was it the? What am I thinking of?
So the launch model DS, the launch model DS Lite, and I think maybe a couple revisions of the original DS had Game Boy Advance support.
Yeah.
And that was the last console to have Game Boy Advance support. I think almost a decade after.
That's pretty good though. I mean, because Advance felt like the leap, compared to Color,
Yeah.
which was like, okay, yeah, we figured out how to put little color into it. I'm not gonna say too much, but Advance felt big. Color kind of felt like an incremental thing. But yeah.
Yeah, I think I saw a lot of people. Like, this is the nostalgia episode by now.
Yeah, I know.
You see a lot of people like at school, like carrying their advances around to play Pokemon Gold and Silver, especially.
Yeah.
I think Gold and Silver came out for the color, right? But they're playing them on the advance.
I think so. Yeah. That was definitely in that wheelhouse time of that very early 2000s of Pokemon being the game. Because I was like 17 when Pokemon really started to become the thing. That's why I say it like an old man. People are like, "What are your starters?" I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. It is funny, like, because you start to learn, hanging out more and more on the avocado, like how weirdly, like even a year or two difference could make in like your pop culture touchstones versus other people's. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
People who are like, "Oh, I grew up watching this," and you're like, "That was little kid stuff to me. I never would have watched that." And then it's sometimes just a year or two difference really between the two.
I found people born early 95, like January or something, have different earlier cultural touchstones than I did, being
Wow.
born in November of 95. And I'm like, did the internet do this? Or was I slower to get into pop culture, which might be true. I don't really remember stuff until I was like 6. So
For me, it's usually, what are your memories of the Disney Channel versus your memories of Nickelodeon? That's, to me, is like a really, because when I was a kid, Disney Channel was a premium channel, like HBO or Showtime, and like it really wasn't something you had if you were 10 and your parents were like, yeah, I'm not paying for the Disney Channel. You know what I mean? But then, like, if you were younger than me, it was like, yeah, of course we'll get the Disney Channel. Our kids are gonna love the Disney Channel. So even that like 1 or 2 year difference is huge, because I grew up on Nickelodeon because it was basic cable, right? And I talk about Are You Afraid of the Dark, and Doug and Ren and Stimpy and all that stuff. And some people don't have the same nostalgia, and they're only a little bit older than me or younger than me. And it's just interesting to see like that little gap, leading to an entirely different like childhood memory or like group of experiences.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, it's like, yeah, for me it was, so Nickelodeon starts with SpongeBob in like 2001 or something, and Disney Channel has been like Kim Possible, Even Stevens, a bunch of, like, I watched Hannah Montana and The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody like as a kid. So
but Disney was, I think, too, for like kind of your age and generation, I think Disney was a little more live action, right?
oh yeah, it was super live.
Yeah. Okay, that makes more sense, because Disney, when I was a kid, was a lot more cartoons, and it was like Mickey Mouse Club and just very kiddie stuff. So
yeah, there are a lot of like sitcoms, a lot of DComs as well, like the Disney Channel original movies. Is my understanding. I mean, we don't really. Disney Channel was a different thing in Canada. It was its own separate channel, and I don't think a lot of people had it. So, like up here, we just didn't have the same touchdowns. I learned about like Disney Channel stuff kind of through cultural osmosis, and then when I went to university and met a bunch of Americans. But yeah, like otherwise, we don't really have that nostalgia up here. But it's really interesting, kind of like going back and like absorbing Hannah Montana
Mhm.
and Sweet Life and all that stuff, like as an adult and seeing how people kind of grew up into that. Uh, I am on the
I'm
Wikipedia
very
page
sorry.
for Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal right now, and I was struck by one of the entries in the table of contents being Pokemon Vietnamese Crystal, and there's just one sentence under the subsection of the article, and it says, a bootleg release of Pokemon Crystal called Pokemon Vietnamese Crystal, often shortened to Vietnamese Crystal, is infamous for its poorly translated English text and gameplay oddities, such as profanity and calling Pokemon elves.
That some kid got that on Christmas. Was like, Grandma, what have you done? This is not real.
Crap! This game is saying the fuck word.
Fuck these elves.
Can you imagine some kid going to school and asking his friend, so what's your starter elf? All right. So Kappa, my understanding is that you've been playing Baldur's Gate 3. Is that right?
Let's talk about it. Let's get into it.
Let's get into the weeds. Let's just dig up them dice.
All right. I kind of feel like this is like a tale of two halves or whatever, because I don't want to come off too negative at all on this game. I really, really enjoyed the time I spent with Baldur's Gate, right? But it's just really weird to kind of like dive into this narrative that I've been seeing and like having such a weird experience with the game itself, where I kind of feel like I'm not hearing what I'm feeling when people are talking about Baldur's Gate right now. So let's start out by saying, like, I'm gonna talk a little bit about a pizza I like, okay? Because I'm gonna try to do like that podcast thing where like you like make a big story and then like turn it into something else, right? So
You're doing the analogy.
yeah. So
Oh, yeah.
I love New Haven style pizza, and it's a very regional type of pizza, right? That most people have probably never heard, right? But I grew up eating New Haven style pizza. That is my default when I think about pizza as a kid. That's what I had, right? Used to go to Pepe's all the time, with my dad.
Okay, what is New Haven style pizza? Is
Okay,
it like
let's start there. So New Haven style pizza is sometimes called a white pie. Um,
okay,
it's
yeah.
kind of it's sometimes called a pizza. So not like a space pizza, but APIZZA, right? Coal pizza. That's the first thing about it, right? And then kind of like a crust where you're putting stuff on the crust. Like I always know it had tomato on it and oregano, but it was kind of like it was burnt almost, if that makes sense, right? Most people would probably see this and think the crust was burnt, and they would not like it, right? Um, they also had a version that was a white clam pizza, which was really good, right? So it's particularly like it's almost burnt pizza is what I would just call it, right? And now to most people, gross, disgusting, right? But I liked it, and that turned out to be the style of pizza I liked. That to me has always also kind of been my relationship with CRPGs, right? They kind of came and went, but I grew up with CRPGs, and it was always my favorite genre, and I always loved them, and I always like make the time to play the latest, whatever the CRPG of that era was, right? So I always loved the Baldur's Gate series. I was a fan from the beginning. I know all the characters. I have my thoughts about Laconia and everybody else, and so I don't know where kind of this like, if you don't like Baldur's Gate, you don't like CRPGs came from, because I don't think that's true. But at the same time, I've been seeing a lot of like, this is a 10 out of 10 game. This game is perfect. This game has everything you could ever possibly want in a video game. And I agreed with that up until about halfway through Act 2. And then the game really started to kind of show some warts. And I was like, well, what happened here? Where did a lot of this go? One thing that was revealed, of course, is there was an absolute shit ton of cut content. The
Yeah.
other thing is that not only was there cut content, but there's content that just doesn't trigger correctly. And in an RPG, that's a big deal, right? If you've done all the checks and dialogues and everything is supposed to happen and it doesn't happen, it feels very frustrating, right? Some of it's bug related, absolutely, right? Some of it's just, hey, we didn't do this right. And some of it is actually tied to, hey, we cut this content out. It is not in the game anymore. So because of that, you're basically seeing the fail state, right, of this outcome. So back to New Haven style pizza. So a lot of people, I think, basically ate that first part of the pizza of Baldur's Gate, right? They ate Act 1. They ate the first couple bites, and it just tastes like regular pizza, and it tastes like the Domino's and everything else that they're used to. And so they were like, you know what? Perfect. I love this. This is my favorite type of pizza. I'm so used to this. This is exactly like what they serve at Domino's, you know? And then they never really got to what made Baldur's Gate kind of work or not work. And that's Act 3 for me. Act 3 feels like a mess.
I've heard that Act 3 is extraordinarily buggy.
Very buggy. And in every way, it could be buggy in the two different ways where there's mechanics that don't work. The fights seem weird. The pacing seems off. The story's all over the place. Like every way you could say, wow, this RPG kind of fell apart. It does it, but all in one act. And I'm seeing a lot of these reviews and a lot of people talking about the game, and they're mostly talking about early Act 1, which is fine because Act 1, honestly, is, if you want to take your time, it's probably a 50 to 60 hour experience. It's not like Act 1 is, 45 minutes or just a tutorial or you're out of the starter town, No, Act 1 is very comprehensive. But at the same time, I think if you're judging the game by Act 1, you're giving an impression of a game that has been basically QA tested by a million people for 3 years, right? And so a lot of the dialogue about, hey, don't expect this from every game, I think maybe a little of that is coming from there. We can't all put our games in early access for 3 years to give you a flawless first 50 hours, right?
Yeah.
That's not to defend the fact that I do think it's ridiculous to be like, well, people are going to want better games now. So, yeah, that's going to suck. I don't think anybody should be walking away from Baldur's Gate saying that. But what I'm more concerned about is, how a lot of times movies and game companies and stuff, they'll take the wrong lesson from certain things that work for whatever reason. And I'm wondering if the lesson a lot of companies are going to say is, why don't we just let the players do QA for us for free? And basically whatever we pump out is what we pump out. But hey, they got what they liked with Baldur's Gate, and that worked out fine. So my experience with Baldur's Gate had kind of started out really positive. Loved Act 1, kind of bounced on and off. I was like, well, should I play this Dark Urge character? Which, in my opinion, thinking back on it now, Dark Urge is the definitive what Baldur's Gate 3 is selling as a play style, right?
So that's where you have something that pops into your head and kind of like tempts you to do evil things, right?
Yes, and I got to be careful with spoilers, but if you've played the Baldur's Gate series, the Dark Urge playthrough is going to feel very similar to every other Baldur's Gate, in that you're not all there. There's something up with your character, and there's something telling you to do things, and there's maybe a question of who's behind it or who's your that it's there. It's there in Baldur's Gate 3. It's there in all the other Baldur Gate. It makes sense for it. It doesn't feel bad or out of place or anything like that. But they were very careful to tell you, hey, this is something where you almost have to fight against it as a player, right? And, from my experience with Dishonored, I don't like bad or evil equal bad or evil or bad ending, right? I want evil and good to be a choice, and I don't think you should be punished for making a choice either way, right? I think that Baldur's Gate 3, whether through bugs or whether through Act 3 not being fully developed, really punishes the shit out of you for choosing evil, which sucks. So that's part of my reaction to this whole, like, hey, I didn't like Act 3 as much as everybody else, was because I played the playthrough that I think a lot of people are maybe not going to play, because evil's not the most popular playthrough. I get it, right? But I also think at the same time that's somehow weird because it's the definitive Baldur's Gate playthrough for me. Either making some evil choices or resisting evil, or however you want to put it, right?
Like flirting with that stuff at least.
Right. And that's, even if you choose not to do it, maybe you don't choose it every time. You know, like maybe there's sometimes like, you know what? Maybe my character would be evil this one time. This guy's just such an asshole. This is the time where actually, yeah, I'm going to choose the evil option, right? I don't want that to lock you into the type of ending where it's like, well, you picked evil once, right? And Baldur's Gate kind of dangles a lot of, if you choose this, there's going to be consequences. The best way I can describe it, and it's not flattering, is Walking Dead, right? A lot of like, they're going to remember this, right? And then a lot like Walking Dead, nope, they don't. You can put as many tide pools in your brain as you want. The game makes it seem like it's going to be a big deal. It ends up not mattering because that content was cut. So,
Yeah. See, I don't mind like consequences for evil or immoral options. I just
right.
want those consequences to be interesting.
Yes, exactly. And so, like, if you play evil and true evil and dark urge and give into your dark urges, you basically cut yourself out of maybe 3/4 of the companions in the game. Definitely all the ones that I feel have fully fleshed out stories, right? And you trade them in for more or less one companion who does not have a fully fleshed out story because her content was cut. So like you're kind of seeing the theme now, right? Like it
Right.
doesn't feel good when you're being told, "Hey, this stuff was in the game. It's something that we did think of. It just never made it to the final version of the game," right? And I don't think that anyone just reading the reviews or watching streams of Baldur's Gate is going to catch on to a lot of this, right? So I'm not trying to be like the Debbie Downer. I really don't want to be, but I do think that there needs to be a little bit of, hey, you know, Larian, I know you're getting 10 out of 10 reviews and being talked about as having saved PC gaming with this game, but at the same time, you didn't deliver a complete experience. And if this was a Dragon Age game, I don't think we'd be talking about it the same way we're talking about this game. I'm just being honest, right? That's the feeling I get with a lot of this is just we're kind of cuddling this up because Larian's a good studio. They seem like nice folks, but the game that's a 10 out of 10 game was the game that was in early access for 3 years. The game that's a 7 out of 10 is the uncompleted, you pulled out the same kind of stuff, the same kind of tactics a lot of those shadier developers do and didn't give us a finished game for certain playthroughs, right? And I think a lot of people aren't going to see that because they're going to be doing their good playthroughs and they're going to be reading the reviews and thinking, okay, well, it's all here. But then second, third, fourth playthroughs, getting to Act 3, I think people are going to start having that experience. And to Larian's credit, they're doing a shit ton of patching right now, right? That looks very good for them, I think, to kind of try to get out of that, like, initial headspace of, like, well, this is done, right? No, it's not done. And a lot of people have been talking about, you know, hey, there's going to not be DLCs. And that was a very initially weird thing for them to announce. But I think they've kind of walked that back now and said, it's not that there's not going to be DLCs. It's that we consider this game basically as is completed and there might be further adventures, but it doesn't mean that we're going to tell you another half of the story later on, which I think is good. So I am not wanting, I really promise I'm not trying to be negative on this game. It's just, I think there's another story to be told too when we start to get into some of the more reactions to this game, where we talk a lot about people saying, you know, some of the comments were just like, well, I hope gamers don't get spoiled by this because not every game's going to be this good. I get it, but I also kind of get what they're saying in that not every studio can be afforded 3 years of early access to be, you know, kind of play tested for them. And then when the game actually comes out, you're just being reviewed on 2/3 of the game. So
and like, I do want to be fair to those reviewers because, like, if what motivated them was I'm going to do a Goody Two Shoes playthrough, or I'm going to pick like this bard character who does whatever, doesn't give in to dark urges, then maybe they have a great time with it, and that's going to be like the truth of their review. But like, you're absolutely right that if it doesn't support every play style that they make viable from the outset, I think that is a problem. Right? That they presented you with a bunch of options, and some options are clearly worse than others.
Right.
Once you get to the back half of the game, that is a deficiency of the game for sure.
And then coupled with some of like the performance hits and the just the general drop in quality in Act 3, and hearing that there was an entire area that was cut from the game as late as June, right? So about 3 weeks before release, they were advertising or talking about this area called the Upper City. Hey, you're finally going to go to the rich areas of Baldur's Gate and see what the nobility lives like, right? That's not in the game, and I mean you can find the Sven, I think Swen's, I'm not sure his name, but
Sven
he was
Viggo.
talking. Yeah, he was talking about it as of a few weeks before launch. Was, hey, this is in here. This is going to be a new cool area. Didn't make the game. It's just really weird because how many times have we talked about over promising or not delivering or whatever you want to talk about? If other RPGs get savage for this kind of stuff, other studios just get taken to the woodshed for half this. Mass Effect died on the face of goofy faces. I don't know. Like I don't think that it should have gotten bad reviews. I just wonder if there's, in kind of this savior of gaming narrative, if there's a little bit more wish fulfillment than there is actually playing the game to completion like you should for reviews.
So let's get into that, because this has sparked a lot of discourse. First, earlier in the summer, actually before release, when folks were like trying to tout it as like this new standard of gaming. Then this indie developer, actually the head of Strange Scaffold, Zelda Nelson Jr., kind of weighed in and said, what Larian does isn't possible across the industry for various reasons.
Right.
And some people kind of took that the wrong way. I think Nelson didn't do himself any favors by not really clarifying that he was like the reasons why those conditions exist for Larian versus other like publishers. So
which is really interesting stuff too, like the country that they're making it in, it being behind it, and like they're a pretty large studio. They're not,
yeah, they're like 400 strong,
400
right?
devs, yeah, that's
and
pretty
then
good, yeah.
You've
it's
got
a
like
double-A game.
Yeah.
It's more than double A. Right? That's like AAA games are often made with like half that many people. It's like clearly a huge workforce behind it, and like you've got this studio that is not beholden to any one publisher. Like really, they're just beholden to Wizards of the Coast for the license.
Right.
Beyond that, they're working on their own schedule. They get to release the game when they want, at the level of quality that they want. It's not getting pushed out the door. So like they have very different pressures than games made for publishers that are publicly traded. So like all of that kind of weighs into this, and it's not stuff that Nelson really touched on in his tweet thread, which is part of what caused a little bit of controversy. But then we get to a few weeks ago, this IGN editor commentator Destin Legary, like he digs into this old tweet thread like a month after the discourse has died down, and he releases this kind of rebuttal video where he takes AAA devs to task for not having like AAA devs have a lot of the same resources, like say your Bungies, your Blizzards, your BioWares, etc., but not delivering on the same quality. And then this rebuttal video inspires a lot of backlash from devs, from games journalists, even some fans who are like, dude, you don't know what you're talking about. This is not how game dev works.
Right.
Yeah, I was in that backlash. I was like, it seems like you're putting a higher standard than is healthy on everyone.
Yeah, I think the weirdest thing about that video was him treating Baldur's Gate 3 as this highly polished, flawless release when it very clearly has a lot of bugs.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so much so that their day one, well, not day one, but like their month one patch is thousands of bugs, and good for them for fixing them. Right. But it's also goes against that narrative that this came out the gate, a flawless, shining example of what you can do when you don't need to have microtransactions. Like, I don't know that I would tie this game's success or failure or anything into the fact of how the game is monetized. I think there is a lot of love in this game. I think they really wanted to give the best product that they could, And I think like a lot of studios, they sometimes do that, right? By aiming a little higher than maybe they should, and then stuff needs to get scaled back, whether narratively or mechanically or just not enough time or things like that, right? Totally get it.
Yeah.
I'm accepting of that, but I think what everybody's getting to at with his is that you can't tell AAA studios, hey, you should have been able to figure this out, when even Larian kind of didn't, and they're pretty big. So
like he keeps saying the devs, the devs, the devs, but like these decisions to like push something out the door, those aren't made by the guy writing individual lines of code or drawing
Right.
individual character models. It's made by managers, it's made by executives.
Yeah.
Right, like the target is just all wrong.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's why it comes across as so ignorant. Like,
Yeah.
This guy's been working in media for like 10, 15 years, and he should know better. Like, he works at IGN. He can go knock on Kat Bailey's or Reb Valentine's door if he wants to know how game development works, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's just so weird for him to be making these statements.
I do think his heart was in the right place of like, hey, let's push these AAA devs to deliver, right?
Yeah, like I totally agree. There's a lot of bad management at these studios. We've seen it with BioWare.
And specifically, I know he's a big Destiny guy, right? And I think this was him taking Bungie to task for kind of this is Bungie's been kind of in Destiny has the cycle, right? The up and down.
Yeah,
cycle,
like
right?
people love Destiny and they hate Destiny and they love it again. Yeah.
Yeah, and Destiny's kind of in that down cycle, and they had just done one of their like Vidocs where they basically was like, here's the state of Destiny, here's where we're at, and kind of famously, Joe Blackburn, basically the head of Bungie, more specifically Destiny, I think, was like, look, we just don't have the resources to kind of do some things that we want to do. And there was within the community, there was a lot of like, whoa, you guys just got bought for billions by Sony. How do you not have the money, right?
And it's like, well, whatever resources Sony decides to allocate,
exactly,
that's what Bungie has.
The money doesn't necessarily equal better. It's just money. Like, you can't just say, well, you got billions of dollars now, do all this and that. It doesn't always work like that. But I think he was
might not even have those billions. Right?
Yeah.
Like, that's the
if
problem.
Money made better, then Duke Nukem Forever would have been the best of all time.
So I think specifically Destin's thing was a little more pointed at Bungie specifically. But I think that he wanted the rant to maybe hit on a larger audience. So I think that he kind of opened it up there.
And that was, I think, a bit of a mistake because the framing ends up being really weird.
Yeah.
And, like, to Gary's credit, I will say some of his critics are really misrepresenting what he's saying. He's not talking about indies. Like, if you're like running a 20-person studio and you feel targeted by this video, I think you're out to lunch. Like, he is very clearly targeting AAA studios. But
so I think that like making my case really though here is that I think if you've actually experienced Baldur's Gate 3 from start to finish, I don't know that you would make maybe this same argument even,
I don't think he would make this video if he'd played Baldur's Gate 3 to the end, right?
Yeah. Right? So like a lot of this like narrative and like a lot of this like discourse is like, wait, did you actually finish this game that you're holding up as the new gold standard? And I think some people did. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't think, it's wrong to say that a lot of people finished it, but I just got to know, like, you didn't experience any of these thousands of bugs from this first patch. You didn't find that the story just kind of came out of nowhere. You didn't notice all this cut content. I mean, it's a page of very big things. And so if you're telling me, look, this game is perfect, I didn't notice any of these bugs, I didn't notice any of this cut content, I think you're lying. I do. And then so now we've got the same scenario of a lot of games. What was the big knock on Mass Effect 3? It wasn't 99% of that game, right? What was it? The three colors of endings. Well, guess what? I got 2 colors of endings in Baldur's Gate 3. And one was, yeah, I'm evil, deal with it. One was, actually, no, I'm not going to be evil. that's rough for a multi-hundred-hour game, and I'm not hearing anybody talk about that because it's still perfect game. And I think Larian would even tell you there's stuff we've got to fix in this game, and I think they're doing it. But I think they're probably a little bit maybe annoyed. Even if I had to guess, they're probably like, "Whoa, let's chill out a little bit on some of this."
Yeah, we
best
just made a
of
game
our
that
lifetime, perfect 10.
Yeah.
Up there with, like, I think it's like got a Metacritic on par with like maybe like Ocarina. I mean, it's way up
It's
there.
I think it's
Wow.
below Ocarina on Metacritic, but it's the top-rated game on OpenCritic right now.
Yeah, there you go. And I mean, I don't disagree that it is a great game. If you're on the fence, go buy it. Stop when you get to the end of Act 2. It's-
Yeah, wait for it to get patched up.
The other thing I was saying about Larian, that to their credit, they do patch up their games. Every Divinity had I don't remember what they call it, enhanced edition, definitive
Yeah.
edition, something like that, right? So they do eventually
Definitive
patch
edition.
definitive.
Sorry,
There you
that was a bad joke.
go. They patch the shit out of it. They fix it up. They get it ready for prime release, and I trust that this game will eventually be a defining CRPG moment. I 100% believe it. I just don't think right there it's there. And I don't think I'm alone. And I think if you go and look in some of the places where they're talking about, hey, spoiler free, what was your ending like? There's a little bit of that. Well, I got the green ending and you got the blue ending, Um,
Didn't we get
so
a chance to pick a red ending?
no, there's no red ending. At least for my character. Now there probably is one, but
There might be, yeah, depending
yeah.
on the choices you've made.
So, I just want to end this with really, really, really. If you're curious about Baldur's Gate, buy it. Support them. They're a good company. I don't mean that they're doing bad things to hide things out. I just think this game had an extremely unique development cycle, and I think there's still more to be fixed and patched. But it is and it will be a great game.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say about this is, like on the note of that uniqueness, this is a team of 400 people, like all working on the same game, plus like contracted as studios. A lot of studios a similar size are working on two or three projects at once, and so like arguments about team size don't really sway me. Like Gary's making in his video. And the other thing is, let's not forget that D&D is freaking huge. It's
Yeah.
like the biggest it's ever been.
Yeah.
Because
Especially
of,
right now too.
yeah, Critical Role and Dimension 20 and like popularity through Stranger Things. It's become this cultural juggernaut that it just was not when I was a kid. And so that's like a big factor in why it's been so successful. And I think that those are things those are things that are really difficult to replicate.
Right.
And that's what I'd like people to keep in mind as they think about Baldur's Gate and the conditions under which video games are made. All right, that was Baldur's Gate 3.
Yeah. Sorry, I went on a little long there.
That's all right. I think this was a good discussion. I think we really do need to get into the weeds with this stuff sometimes. Like, if there's been one touchstone of this podcast, pretty much since its inception, is that we haven't been afraid of talking about the conditions under which games are made and what like development looks like and how games to get to where they are. And so I think it's really important for our audience and for people in general to think about this stuff. No, I'm not saying like you as a consumer when you go to the store have to like think about all the things that went into the game when you're making a transaction. No, that's not what I want our listeners to be thinking about. But I do think it's important to have a general idea of like the amount of work and blood, sweat, and tears that goes into the entertainment you consume. Just to like appreciate it and understand where it's coming from.
Right.
Wasp, you're playing Marvel Snap these days, right?
Oh yeah, it's my main trading card game, though I've recently got back into the Pokemon trading card game too. Partially just so I could compare them, but but yeah.
So why don't you
Snap,
actually tell us about Marvel Snap? I think we've actually like never talked about Marvel Snap. Like it's been mentioned on this podcast, but I don't think we've ever talked about it in depth. So let's get into the weeds. Tell us about Marvel Snap. How are you? I mean, it's been out for a while. How is your like interaction with it?
So the basics is you got a 12-card deck, right? And you got to choose an archetype. Like right now, I'm playing the Patriot deck, which is you have Patriot, and then you have either Mystique or Blue Marvel, and they all work together to buff up no ability cards. So like I've got Wasp,
Of course.
Cyclops sucks in this Patriot deck. Though he has no ability, he's just not viable right now. And then I have Brood, Mr. Sinister, because he gets Sinister Clone, and the Sinister Clone gets buffed. And then like the Broodlings will get buffed. And then you have to hopefully your draw comes out well for your combo pieces. Sorry, I'm trying to explain a complex deck, and I'm like, how do I not sound like...
How do you not sound like you're speaking moon language?
Yeah.
So the basic idea, my understanding, is that it's like you've got 3 zones or lanes or something like that, and you're trying to like win the zones or lanes. Is that
Yeah,
it works?
That's
so like
the whole thing
Hearthstone,
too.
you have multiple lanes, but Snap added a 3rd lane, and each lane has a gimmick. So like my favorite lane is a White Hot Room, where if you fill it first, you get +5 max energy the rest of that game.
Some of the rooms too are really weird. Like you don't want to win them. You want to like at least initially lose them. It's the rooms or the lands are very interesting how they make you play.
Yeah. Like Bar Sinister, it will make will copy whatever card you play there 3 extra times. So sometimes I like to lose that lane by tossing in a combo card to buff up everyone else, or just destroy a bunch of shit on the other 2 lanes.
And then there's somewhere like you want to leave it empty until like the last turn or the next to last turn, or like there's little like weird rules with each one. And the lands make it feel fresh because a lot of times they don't update all the cards. Some of the seasons will just be new lands really, and it makes the whole gameplay different.
Yeah. Although now they've started updating the cards more frequently to keep the metagame fresh, because back in January, I want to say, was the infamous Zabu Silver Surfer season, where you used Zabu to knock your 4-cost cards down to 2 energy apiece, and then you just swarmed the board with Spider-Mans and Absorbing Man, and it was repulsive how oppressive it was.
Snap I enjoy it. It was my mobile game of choice for a long time, but it is something you kind of got to keep up with because whole decks will basically change over season sometimes if you've really got a very specific build.
Yeah, that's like you always have to keep up with the meta, especially with a free-to-play game, because they want people in there buying packs or whatever people buy in this game.
You cannot.
You have to have an evolving meta if you want to monetize.
Yeah, the monetization is really interesting. You can't buy packs. You can't buy cards even. You can buy upgrades to cards, I think, sometimes with real money. But even then, you've got to actually unlock the card. Unless they've changed, I think you've got to unlock the card normally. Really what it pushes you to more is towards the season pass, I think. Like leveling that up. So kind of like a Fortnite style, what you call it, battle pass.
I call it mixed positive in terms of like monetization ethics, for lack of a better word, because you really mostly buy cosmetics, except for the $10 season pass, which gives you a new card 3 months before anybody else can get it. So like the pay to win aspect is low. And I mean, for a trading card game, pay to win is like, that's fine. I don't really judge a card game being pay to win. That's how the model works. But...
Yeah. I think it's a better monetized game than lots and lots of other card games specifically are, though.
Yeah. I'd say my biggest issue is it's hard to figure out what the value of things is. like there's a death bundle right now for the card Death. She gets a variant. You get a card back with her on it. You get an avatar and a bunch of in-game currency. But they're
Wait, there's a
selling
Marvel
it.
character named Death?
Yeah.
Yeah. She
Okay,
is
cool.
Deadpool's on and off girlfriend, and also just the personification of death. And
Makes sense that Deadpool would date her.
Yeah, and so Thanos' thing in the comics is he wants to kill half of all life to impress Death, so he can date her instead of Deadpool dating her. But
Not the same reason as in the MCU.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Anyways,
In the MCU, he's just a stupid Malthusian.
Oh yeah, no, in the MCU he's just bad. I don't know. I like the movies.
He likes them genocides. That's for sure.
Yeah.
He's also got a helicopter in the comics. You know, you get the little Thanos copter.
Oh,
Have
he
you
has
seen
the
that?
We were
helicopter in
robbed
the
of so
MCU.
much in the MCU.
His sword in Endgame is the Thanos
Wait, that-
copter helicopter rotor.
Holy shit, like,
that's
a man with a helicopter tried to impress a girl? That makes him Artie Ziff. Thanos is Artie Ziff.
Oh, that's good. I think Snap is that rare mobile game that just works on every level. The only thing is you got to keep up with it. That'd be my only knock on it, is if you really want to stay. It's hard to drop in and out, but there's so many little fun gimmicks to it too. Agatha Harkness was maybe my favorite one for a while, but there's little cards that just have very specific ways to play with them, and it's really fun to get one of those in your deck and just give it a hey, what the hell, I'll try this.
What I love about it compared to slower games like Pokemon or Magic is there's a gamble heavy feel to it. You're constantly snapping and betting and bluffing your opponent.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the best decks have low win rates but high cube rates. So you're retreating or losing more than you win, but whenever you win, you're getting 8 cubes, more than you're getting 4 or 2 cubes.
I think it'd be interesting, as a psychology profile to figure out who snaps and when. You know what I mean? If you're the round one snapper, I'm gonna snap when I'm definitely gonna win. There's a lot of psychology there about snapping and when you do back out and when you don't. You're just all the way in. So
for our listeners, what is snapping in Marvel Snap?
So the snap mechanic is you basically are doubling down, in a poker,
doubling down.
like a poker game. You've gone from calling or checking. You've gone to I'm doubling my bet with you that I am going to beat you, and you can snap early for if you snap early, I think you can get up to 4 points. I think if you snap mid, you can get 2, and if you snap towards the end, it's 1. I'm not 100%. If you lose the snap, though, you lose 4, 2, or 1, right?
Right.
So I would say the majority of the game, I don't know about majority, I'd say 50% of the time, no one snaps, at least in my experience. But I'm not super high ranked or anything. But then I would say 25% of people act, first card as soon as they can. And then 25% of people wait till the last hand to see if they feel like they're going to win. But yeah, it's just kind of weird to see who snaps and when.
Before I moved to Conquest mode, I was in the 70s for rank most seasons, and people there start to snap mid-game depending on board state.
Mm-hmm.
So if I look like I'm losing, but my hand shows me I have the god cards, then I'll snap.
Yeah.
And then I'll try to get them to either retreat out or more hopefully that they play in, and then my combo beats their combo for the 8. But
it is so cool to drop a Namor on an island you hadn't dropped anything yet for, and totally win it. And yeah, so I probably win more than I don't when I don't snap, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Do you play Conquest mode at all? That's what I play most days now, because it's both lower stakes because the lowest conquest tier is casual mode. You're not losing anything if you lose. But
That's what I usually played was the casual mode. It's just I don't like, because I usually play it before bed. I don't want to lose a whole night's worth of whatchamacallit, progress because had a bad run or something.
Oh yeah, when they a few months ago they changed the ladder ranking for cubes, so you only need 7 cubes to go up a rank. But now that means if you lose 7 cubes, you're down again. And I kind of stopped playing the ladder after that. I was like, this is hard. The climb is impossible now.
Yeah, when you're down at the bottom, hard to kind of claw your way back.
It really is.
That's for sure.
There's a lot of games like that where it's like, man, I got to get back on this. So
yeah, it's like long-term Souls-like at that point. Sorry,
I wouldn't call it a flaw either. It's just how the game works. Like, they could make it easier to climb rank, but I'm not sure how good it would be.
I don't really feel like rank is that big of a deal either, though. To be honest with you, like
Yeah.
I never felt like I had to get my rank up or I was like missing out on stuff. It was more about finishing my season pass. But yeah. So
yeah, that makes sense. Like, you want to take advantage of what you've paid for. That's for sure.
Speaking of not paying a lot, I heard you've been playing some indie games.
I have been playing a couple of indie games.
That was my attempt.
That was your attempt at a segue.
Yeah.
So these are games that I've finished, and I'm going to talk about 2 of them. One called Venba, and one called The Cosmic Wheel Sisterhood. Venba, I think, is the more well-known one. That's the one that's been kind of all over the press. And it's been especially big up here in Canada because the game was made here and is set in Canada.
It got a nice little feature on Game Pass, I noticed. So they redesigned the home screen for Xbox, and basically the game, at least on my screen, I don't know if it's like, algorithm or what, it got a nice little feature on the home screen. I thought that was pretty cool for them.
Yeah, and it is an easy game to kind of feature because it has such a strong hook.
Mm-hmm.
The premise is that it's about a South Indian couple that immigrates to Canada, specifically the Greater Toronto area, in search of increased prosperity, better life for a kid they might have in the future. Then they have that kid, and that kid is kind of stuck between the culture of his parents and Canadian culture. So those kinds of tensions between him and his parents kind of form the backdrop of the story, as well as the struggles that the couple has in adapting to their life in Toronto. So the gameplay is kind of half divided between visual novel sections and cooking puzzles. And these cooking puzzles are these kind of pretty simple point and click kind of experiences where you're given, say, a bunch of ingredients and some cooking equipment, and then you have to combine them at the right time and using the right techniques in order to produce a dish. The premise is that, like, you've got this old family cookbook and it's gotten damaged over the years, and you're kind of trying to decipher the recipe from that, and you're kind of filling in the blanks using, basic logic about how food works and how cooking works. Funnily enough, this is hilarious to me because Indian people do not write down recipes at all. Anytime I want to figure out how something is made, I'll ask my mom, okay, how much of this should I put in this dish? And she'll be like, I don't know, eyeball it. I'm like, that doesn't help me. My eyeballs are different from yours. I have no idea. And, like, I grew up, like, learning to cook this way. I still remember when I was living in undergrad in an apartment with a roommate. I was just, like, making stir-fry. I wasn't even making Indian food. And my roommate comes by and says, oh, it smells great. I'm like, yeah, thank you. She's like, oh, what's the recipe? I'm like, I don't know. I just chop some vegetables, put some garlic, some sauce. Like, there's no recipe. And she's like, how'd you cook without a recipe? I'm like, I don't know. I just eyeball it. And she thought that was the most insane thing she'd ever heard. Because she's like a baker.
Like not like measuring it out, yeah.
Everything's like measured out carefully for her, and I'm like, I don't know, just put stuff on the stove and see what happens. I'm like, she's like, well, what are you gonna do next time? I'm like, probably use different vegetables. It's a stir fry, right? So anyway, that's kind of how this game is set up. It's got this kind of lovely, like really painterly art style, and like for the sound design, I think what they actually did was they recorded Foley of like food being cooked, and they have those sound effects in the game. So it's like actual like live sounds of food being cooked, and that's why it sounds so accurate. So I should like give a little bit of my own background here. I have a similar life story. My parents also immigrated to Canada from India, and I was born in Canada, like the kid in this game. The difference is my parents are from North India, not South India, so the language is completely different. A lot of the customs are different. Food's completely different. Language is, in fact, from a completely different language family. Like Hindi and Tamil are not at all the same language at all. And the food is very, very different. I recognize a lot of it because my parents both love South Indian food. So they love idli, sambar, dosa, etc. And so I actually grew up eating quite a bit of that food, but it's not really like the traditional food of North Indian people from my background. And so like I know kind of enough about some of the subtle cultural stuff that I've been able to pick up on that I don't think a lot of commentators who've been talking about this game can pick up on because they just don't have that background. Like one of the things that people are not necessarily going to pick on is that the family's kind of coded as a lower caste family because they're not vegetarian.
That's interesting.
And so, and the other thing that's like the real giveaway is that they don't have their friends and the people whom they know in the country are not like academics or like lawyers, doctors, engineers, people who work in offices. Like that's not whom they know. Whom they know is very blue collar. And so like they're not from the affluent part of the Indian diaspora. They're very much from the working class portion of the diaspora. And generally like these people be coded as lower caste. Like even down to things like skin tone. Like it's all very coded in that particular way. And like also having this background, it kind of gives me, and I want to be very careful how I phrase this, because I did like this game ultimately. I think it is an experience worth having, but it's also an experience that I have trouble embracing. And it's because this game feels like it's always holding the player at a little bit of a remove, at a little bit of a distance. Like it's almost scared of backlash. And I don't know. I'm going to avoid explicit spoilers. But this game is kind of constantly hinting at the xenophobia and racism that these people face living in this country. And like, you know, I should be honest, like I did face some of that growing up. I faced a lot less of it as an adult for various reasons. But the game is a little bit reluctant to actually depict that. Mm-hmm. Because I think if you were to depict it, then it becomes something that people can pick apart.
Okay.
Whereas if you leave it to people's imagination, then like it's easy for them to kind of just make whatever inference they're going to make, and then they're not going to like judge you for it. If that makes any sense.
Right.
Like if you show this this confrontation or like a microaggression or some like culturally insensitive situation, then that becomes something that the audience can analyze. But if you don't show it, if you just say it happened, then that's not something people are going to analyze. And so I think the devs were afraid of that, and so they avoid showing that stuff. And that feels a little, not exactly safe, but not fully honest to me. And there's like some complicated cultural stuff they just don't want to show. Like the intergenerational tensions between parents and kids are not just like, oh, the parents don't want the kids to forget the culture and the kids are kind of rejecting the culture. It runs a lot deeper than that, and there's more bound up in it than that, and that's just not displayed on the screen at all. And so the ultimate, like, the tension at the center of the relationship between the kid and his parents never really rang true to me, because like it is very much from the parents' perspective, and so the kid's always going to come across as more petulant than maybe he actually is, but it's not really an honest depiction of how these dynamics usually go down.
Yeah, that's kind of I think some of the feedback that Miss Marvel was getting when it was released on MCU, kind of that generational struggle is really hard to depict unless you're getting super specific with like what each side faced and how, you know, both are awful, but you know they feel different because of the generation.
Yeah, it can get really ugly, and I totally understand why. Like, if you're going to put something out and it's going to go to a mostly non-Indian audience and they're going to go play this, you don't want them. Like, the backlash you really don't want is people playing this and saying, oh, there's this like deep-seated conservatism here that's really ugly and it's not compatible with Canadian values. And
Right.
I don't know why we have these people here in our country. And then that becomes the backlash. And so I totally understand why they don't want to depict it. But, like, I feel as a player and as someone from not exactly that background, but a similar background, okay, why don't you trust me, developers? Like, why don't you trust me to take the right message from this? But also, like, I'm not, like, you know, a 8th generation Canadian whose family came over, like, you know, I'm not a descendant of the Fils du Roi or anything like that, right?
Right.
So, like, you know, I understand why they're being safe.
Yeah. So I mean, because like, also if you, I think, like if you don't want the story to become incredibly specific too, you've got to leave a little room. You know what I mean? To at least, yeah.
See, I don't blame them, but like I kind of want to provide this perspective because it's not a perspective I've seen expressed anywhere in games media. And again, this is not me like ragging on the game. I think it is like a pretty good experience, and it's so short that I think everyone should just play this because it is really lovely. But it is something that I have trouble like fully embracing. So
That's interesting.
yeah, that's my perspective on Venba. The other game that I played recently that I think folks will maybe enjoy, maybe not enjoy, I don't know, is called The Cosmic Wheel Sisterhood. So I think this one is super interesting, and it took me completely by surprise. I wasn't even like looking forward to it, and then people started talking about it the couple weeks up to release, and I was like, okay, yeah.
I actually thought it was a visual novel. So this is
It is a
Devolver,
little bit.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a Devolver published, developed by a Spanish trio called Deconstructing. And this is like, it is a very talky game. It is kind of visual novel-y, but not really exactly. So
it's hard to. This was one of those games. I want to say we saw it like maybe like an indie showcase type thing. I couldn't even figure out what kind of game it was originally.
oh yeah, they did not do a good job of selling the gameplay of this game. Like, if you're going to be sold on this game through trailers and promotional materials, it's going to be from the vibes, and the vibes are impeccable.
Yeah.
Like,
But
the
Devolver
art style-
nails that, yeah.
sorry, Wasp, what were you saying?
Oh, I said it looks immaculately vibed.
Oh, absolutely. Like the art style, and I'm not someone who likes pixel art generally, but the art style here is incredible, and the color palette they've used, and how expressive they've made the character models, it's unbelievable. And the soundtrack is by far the best video game soundtrack of the year. It's this like space rock, instrumental prog electronica, like almost kind of jazzy kind of soundtrack. It is so good. absolutely adore this
So
game's music.
is it a card builder?
Sort of.
Okay.
So let me explain exactly what it is.
Deck builder, I guess I should call it.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of a deck builder, except for not from pre-existing cards. So the premise is that you play as a witch named Fortuna, who is exiled from her cosmic coven and forced to live essentially in a house by herself for a millennium.
All right.
She was exiled because she predicted the coven's downfall with tarot cards.
Oh.
Because she's a tarot reader.
Did her
So she
job.
doesn't. She's exiled, and her deck is taken away from her, and so she makes a pact with essentially a demon, and the demon says, "I know you don't have a deck. Why don't you build your own deck?" And
Okay.
she's like, "With what cards?" And he's like, "You're also going to build the cards." And so the way this game works is you get like different card components, which all have different elemental energy costs: air, fire, water, earth. Because this is a witchy game, it's
Yeah.
going to have the witchy kinds of elements. And you build cards from components that each have different elemental costs. Then the way you interact with people is you'll have regular conversations with them, and some will lead to card readings, like tarot readings, except for with your custom cards. Then the way you'll draw a card, that's by chance, and then you get to select from a bunch of interpretations of that card that you've drawn.
Oh, that's really
And
cool.
that's the choice element.
Yeah,
How you interpret the card.
Wow.
that sounds cool.
It's super cool.
Because like you know, like if you pull like the death card, people are like, "Oh, actually, this isn't death. This is a new opportunity." It's like,
Exactly.
yeah, that sounds kind of bullshit. You know, that thing says death.
But you can interpret it in that way, but you'll be restricted by
Right.
the card you've drawn. So death, it might be literal death, or it might be like death and rebirth with a new opportunity. But you're not going to be able to say like death is a new spring. But a card like Harvest might allow you to say, "Oh wow, it's a new spring that's coming up." So
That's really cool, though. That's a very neat mechanic.
it's a super neat mechanic because it also works on a second layer where different readings also give you different elemental energies, which you then feed back into your deck building. So sometimes you're picking a choice because you want to narratively see what happens if you pick that particular interpretation. And sometimes you're picking a choice because you're kind of indifferent between the options and you just want a specific kind of elemental energy. And like playing those two off against each other is kind of what makes the core of the gameplay experience. It is such a well-written game. Characters
really
are all
cool.
super well realized.
It's on Switch. Is that where you played it?
It's on Switch and PC, I believe. I actually played it on PC.
Oh, okay.
But I think it worked perfectly fine on Switch. I think the one thing I've heard that's a little bit of a minus with the Switch version is that the part where you construct the cards is a little clunky if you don't have a mouse and keyboard. But otherwise, I've heard it runs perfectly fine on Switch. There are no like memory leaks or anything. I will say other things about this game are like kind of the core thematic element is like, you know, I said the choice element of the game is how you interpret your card drawings. The kind of core premise, which I'm not going to reveal, almost like literalizes that way of thinking about interpretation.
Okay.
Like that interpretation is a choice, very much so, in the fiction of this game. I'm not going to spoil what I mean by that, but this is a game that's very much like cognizant of the fact that it's a choice and consequence game and plays around with the idea of choice and consequence in a way that like Telltale games never really did so much. It's not exactly meta, but it's very much in conversation with the fact that it is a game where you make choices. There's also a game that the other reason I think it's really fantastic is that it's a really inclusive celebration of womanhood. Like whether motherhood be hetero or womanhood be hetero or queer, or cis or trans, or whether you're a mother or not a mother, whatever background you come from, like all these characters are kind of on display, and the game like says womanhood kind of encompasses all of this. So I think it's really neat to have this kind of like really inclusive experience to play. So
Sounds cool.
That is not recommended. Games do much. Still, it's just a fronted celebration of the entire gender thing.
Yeah, I like that's one of the things that's so special about it. Like, there's like every character that you encounter in this game except one is a woman. The demon you make a deal with, kind of the second most important character in the game, is male, but every single other character in this game is a woman, which is super cool in my view. We should have more games like this. It's also, like I said, a game where you make a lot of decisions, and it's a game where, like, typically you make decisions, especially like in RPGs and other kinds of games, you make them in a really risk-averse way because you're like, I don't want to piss anyone off. I don't want to get the bad ending, right? Yeah. Here's a game where sometimes you just make decisions because you think they'll be super interesting. Like, they might even be bad decisions, and you just want to see what happens because you just want to see how wild this whole thing can get. Really fantastic game. Probably my game of the year so far. It's gonna have tough competition from like Pikmin 4, Space for the Unbound, a couple of other games like Starfield's upcoming, and that's probably going to be stiff competition. But this is a fantastic experience. If you want something that's like 2/3 Life is Strange, 1/3 Pentiment, I think this is the game for you.
I'm in.
Yeah, the last third of this game, like,
more Pentiment.
Yeah.
A lot of people do not like the last third of this game, and I actually like the hard left turn it takes. Because, like, the first 2/3, like, is really, like, imagine Life is Strange but super abstract. I'd liken it to Glitch Hikers, except for that's not a game a lot of people have played, but it is very Glitch Hikers-y. And the last third, it becomes, like, really political and almost Pentiment-y, in a really fantastic way. I adored Pentiment. Pentiment was my favorite game last year.
We both,
I like both those things. Like, if you give me a game that's part Life is Strange, part Glitch Hikers, part Pentiment, like, that's a game made for Merve, right? So that speaks very much to my sensibilities. But people who really like the first 2/3, and then when it gets Pentiment, they're like, it's not really for me. I totally get that. But if you're the very weird person who likes all those things, then this is the game for you.
That sounds rad. This game looks very cool.
Yeah, I'm listing it right now.
Oh, I think you would love this game, Wasp. I think this is a game where, like, I think there's some sequences in this game that are going to super speak to you, and I'm really interested to see what you think. All right, that has been Merve's Indie Game Corner. We are going to take a short break, and when we come back, we are going to preview Fall 2023. welcome back, listeners, to episode 94 of the Avocado Games Cast. As I mentioned before the break and the pretty little ditty that you guys just heard, we are going to preview the remaining 4 months of the year in video games. There are so many big games coming out in the back quarter, third. I can do math, third of the year. We've got like Starfield's coming out. There's a new Super Mario game. There's a new Sonic game, Marvel Spider-Man 2, Cities Skyline 2, Alan Wake 2, Persona 5 Tactica, new Call of Duty, Avatar Frontiers of Pandora. It is a packed last 4 months of 2023. So, what I wanted to ask you folks is, which of these games are you looking forward to? What is on your radar?
I mean, it begins and ends with Starfield for me. Like,
Same.
It's hard because I know that people are going to be as negative as possible to Starfield. But I'm just hoping it blows people away. That it feels more like people are nitpicking than anything. You know what I mean? Like, because people are already complaining, like saying, "Oh, the intro is short," and we got people on Twitter literally complaining about the start menu. You know.
Who gives a shit what Mark Kern says? That guy's a Gamergate asshole. Go to hell.
But I'm ready to be blown away by a Bethesda game again. I was blown away by Skyrim. All the little goofiness and weirdness and bugs aside, I'm ready for Starfield, and I can see myself really sinking into that till November-ish. You know, that November starts to get a little more interesting though. I'm interested in Dungeons 4 is a sequel to a really sleeper hit series that I really enjoyed, right? I really like Dungeons 3. It's got a really cool sense of humor to it, very goofy and funny. So that's my second one, but I'm all in on Avatar. I'm not I legitimately,
me too.
Not hot take. I said this, and I mean this. I am more interested in Avatar than Star Wars right now. I legitimately am. I think it is such a cool world, and I think you can build so much, and it's not so beholden to nostalgia and, you know, what happens to this person and where's this ship and things like that. I can really just see Avatar doing its own thing. And I want more time.
They've essentially just made Far Cry in Pandora, which is fine.
It's the perfect mix.
I think you can, if you elevate that concept just a little bit, I think you can make a really fantastic game.
Yeah.
I'll go on and say like how much I dislike the like 90s Native American stereotype throwback Na'vi. Although the Na'vi Marines look dope, so I just like put them in different clothes and it's fine. But like if it's Far Cry on Pandora, like I don't. Maybe Just Cause on Pandora would be better for me, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think that could be a lot of fun too. I think they're kind of emphasizing more the tactical a bit and the sneakiness. But hey, if this game lets you just blow shit up, cool. I'm down. I enjoyed some of the Just Cause games. Just Cause 2 was a lot of fun. Hey, Just Cause 1, which nobody talks about. That game is fun. I'm a little less positive on 3 and 4. But yeah, I'd go out there and play a Na'vi wrecking shit in Pandora.
You know,
sounds like fun to me.
You can team up with Pyacon or like a similar space whale and just blow shit up. Like, I'm all in.
Oh yeah. Sorry, Kappa, you were saying something? Kappa died. That's okay.
Oh, no, sorry. Sorry, I'm here. Similarly to how people don't talk about, you know, a lot of the early games, Far Cry 1, I think, has maybe more hooks to it than people remember. But that was a really cool shooter of its time. Even just approaching the world in an open setting, I thought was really neat.
Far Cry 1 was like linear but wide.
Right,
linear.
yeah. There was a path for sure, but it was, you know, you could approach each attack in different ways, kind of like what Halo was doing at the same time, you know, but in a really smart way.
Yeah,
I
I
think it was
played
kind
it
of like
3 years ago in lockdown, the first Far Cry, and I was like, man, this is the best I think I've seen linear rooms look even
Mhm.
like nowadays, how they laid them all out. It was
And
impressive.
it does a lot of tricks to kind of show you like distance and range and how far things were. I thought that was really smart at the time, and it made the combat feel more like a decision rather than just like you open the door, now you got to kill 5 guys or whatever.
that game is brutally
Oh
difficult,
yeah,
but
yeah.
it gives you ways to manage that difficulty in the sense that you can, if something doesn't work, you have different
Yep.
options. I will say they never patched out the bug where enemies can shoot you through the walls, and that sucks. But other than that, I think it's an interesting game. So, Wasp, what are you looking forward to?
So Age of Empires 4 is what I'm really looking forward to. I,
Oh, is that not out yet? I did not know that.
no, it comes out in October, like the 28th. Maybe it's an early access or something, but I don't know. I don't play a lot of early access. So.
Oh, it's already out for Windows. It comes out for Xbox
Oh, okay.
in August.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm a dirty
oh, it is already out.
because
Oh, it came out 5 days ago.
oh, okay. Yeah. My
Age is
laptop
fantastic.
Mario, this
feels
podcast,
all
go play the game.
administration, it isn't game anymore.
All right. What else are you looking forward to?
Suikoden 1 and 2 HD remaster, other extra title bits I don't want to say all of. Uh,
Oh yeah, PT's gonna be real pleased.
Yeah,
yeah.
he loves that.
We always got to mention Suikoden on the podcast. Yeah, I've heard really good things, especially about Suikoden 2. It's kind of like a generation-defining game as far as JRPGs go.
Oh, yeah, it's one of the best JRPGs on the PlayStation, and I think it's better than Final Fantasy VII.
Oh
Wow.
man, them's fighting words. I mean, I like it. I love when
Not
we get
with Merve,
spicy on this
because Merve's
podcast.
our played Final Fantasy, but
I've never played a Final Fantasy game. I have no investment. Oh wait, no. I have played a Final Fantasy game because I played all the Kingdom Hearts series.
Yeah,
I love saying that
There's my
because
eyes
Final
water.
Fantasy nerds get so mad when you say it. But yeah, I'm glad that like these classic JRPGs are getting a chance to shine again.
yeah, same.
Anything else?
there's always a Super Mario Wonder, which looks.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm always
That
down for
game-
more Mario. So
I'm not like I will say this. While I'm not really vibing with the art style because it's a little too reminiscent of the new Super Mario Brothers games for me, I will say I'm glad they're getting really weird with it now. Like, and we all joke about how Mario's hallucinating on shrooms, but this time it seems like he really is hallucinating on shrooms.
Well, also, this is the first time since the '90s we've had a Sonic versus Mario release month, right?
Oh yeah, no, they're not only are they releasing in the same month, I think they're releasing within 3 days.
There
actually.
you go. That's some classic.
oh.
That's some old feels, right?
Yeah, Super Mario Brothers Wonder is going to crush Sonic Superstars. I'm sorry.
yeah.
It's just, we know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Like, Mario's riding high after the success of the Mario movie. People love that movie. People are hungry for more Mario. They're going to play the hell
And it's
out
a
of this
classic
game.
platformer too, right?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Also, Mario games are polished and usually completed, whereas Sonic games, I fall through the floor trying to play the first level. So,
I just think it's like, I mean, if you could have a whole year to release games, like you can't do that. You know how the star of platforming is right now. That's wild to maybe even consider releasing at the same time.
Yeah, if I were Sonic Team, I'd be thinking of pushing this back to, like,
November-ish, yeah.
November, December. There's not much slated for December. Just like get it early in December. Parents will still buy it for their kids for Christmas, I think.
I mean,
it's probably for the best.
Because we're definitely talking about a little bit of difference between like hits and splashes, right? Like when, kind of like that release where it's just sucks all the air out of the room, whether it's good or bad or whatever, right? I could really see that being Modern Warfare again, right? Only because this is kind of it'll be Microsoft's Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 by that point, And I think it's going to really, really be something that even if you're not a fan, it might be something to pay attention to and see kind of where they're going with these Blizzard games. I wouldn't be surprised by December if we're looking at a Game Pass with Diablo 4, Call of Duty, and a World of Warcraft subscription built into Game Pass. And I think that is going to be a game changer. I think it's going to, you want players, right? All the money in WoW isn't really in the subscriptions anymore, right? You get that whale hooked for life, and that's where the money's coming from. I could see that being Microsoft, what they've got plans for. But I think Call of Duty is going to be the one that, even if you're not going to play it, it's the one to watch this year when that actually comes out.
Yeah, the difficult thing is, I think Microsoft wishes they were going into this acquisition with a Call of Duty that looked more promising.
I do too. Yeah,
because people are not vibing with what they've seen so far of Modern Warfare 3. This was actually supposed to be a year when Activision was going to skip releasing a Call of Duty, and they've kind of, like, the rumor is they've repurposed a bunch of cut content and kind of cobbled together something at the last minute to make a new Call of Duty.
That's kind of a common thing, though, I think, with all Microsoft's purchases. Some of these studios might not have existed after all the games came out. Like, after Deathloop and a couple other games, it kind of flops here, flops there. Who knows what would have happened to some of these studios if Microsoft hadn't bought them? Redfall might have been a studio killer, It's interesting to see now from the perspective, okay, well, this is what they had ready, and Microsoft made them get it out the door, sure, but, people forget a lot of studios are one or two bad games away from being done,
I think Bethesda would have, if they hadn't been acquired, probably would have eventually killed Arcane.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think Arcane would have been dead, and I like 50-50 on Obsidian. I don't think they would have gotten.
Obsidian wasn't owned by Bethesda.
Well, but as part of Microsoft's purchases, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I'm just saying, like, they were making good games, but they were very specific games that I don't know that you can bankroll a studio that size on without Microsoft's big money bucks on the other end of it. So I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing that Microsoft bought these companies. I just want to really, 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 really see what the future of Game Pass looks like, because, man, if you don't have Game Pass now, I think you're crazy. Just as a person who likes games, who can, play so much just at that price point. And then if you start to bundle in stuff like, the classic WoW stuff and then Call of Duty, man, that is, and you've already got the EA access, and part of the deal, I'm not exactly sure how this works. I think maybe you might know more about it, Merve, but apparently Ubisoft Plus is going to be the streaming partner.
So the way it's going to work is Microsoft will effectively sell the streaming rights to Call of Duty games to Ubisoft through a wholesale mechanism. So I should explain this. Effectively, it'll be priced as if it were sold through wholesale, but the buyer is predetermined. So that's what they mean by a wholesale pricing mechanism. So then Ubisoft has the rights to Call of Duty for cloud streaming. Ubisoft is then free to do with those rights as they wish. So they could go license those rights out to Sony, to Nintendo, to any other cloud streaming platform that they see fit.
Very interesting.
And in particular, Microsoft would have to purchase those rights back from Ubisoft if they wanted to cloud stream Call of Duty.
You know what? That's a very 10-cent kind of deal, isn't it? Like,
yeah.
Doesn't it kind of feel like something like they would do, make a game for this
really.
specific platform, and then if you want your rights back, you got to buy them back, kind of.
I don't think Tencent's ever done anything
Really?
like that. This is a really like convoluted
Yeah.
and run around like Microsoft owning it because like of course Ubisoft's going to license it back to Microsoft. I think they might get in antitrust trouble if Ubisoft licenses it back to Microsoft for less than
Who am I
Microsoft
thinking
licensed
of?
it
The company that
to
always
Ubisoft.
licensed MMOs at first, and then they sell it to like somebody else, like as like a whole. Is it Nexon maybe?
Maybe next
There's
one.
like a company who just develops. It probably is because there's a lot of Korean
Is it,
MMOs.
is it a Korean studio?
Yeah, I think so. And I think what
Nexon.
they
That would be Nexon
Yeah, I
probably,
think that's
right?
kind of like-
Tencent is Chinese.
yeah, I
not
think
Korean.
that's might be. I'm thinking of Nexon. I think that's kind of like their business model. And I wonder if that's what Microsoft saw and said, like, look, you can actually kind of make money doing this because I know they do. But the whole like, I haven't.
I don't think.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Microsoft's going to be making any money off this. I think if they did make money off this, then they'd be slapped with antitrust.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
maybe that's their whole thing is they have to just totally separate from it.
They have to lose the money on
Jeez.
like. I mean, they have
Lose the money off the cloud though, not anything else. So
right. They lose like essentially they have to lose money on licensing it back, and then presumably make that back in increased Game Pass subscriptions. What I would guess they're trying to do.
okay.
I mean, like, you know, I find all of this really convoluted and probably not that great for the industry, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
And I found a lot of the arguments against it
What I want to know is
unpersuasive and malformed, let's say. There are good arguments against this, but they're kind of moot because the horse has already left the barn. So, anyway, we've talked about this a lot in the previous episode.
Oh,
Sorry, Wasp.
Oh,
Go
this is
ahead.
weird to me because Hollywood right now is imploding because of streaming, and I'm like, is the game industry not looking at this and being like, let's slow down on Game Pass? Because they're putting everything on Game Pass. Like, you don't really need to buy Diablo anymore. You just Game Pass it.
I think that's Microsoft's play, though. I think that even to the point where they don't care if you buy an Xbox at this point. That's wild to think about, right? From the perspective of
Sure, but like I don't think that's what Wasp is getting at. Like that, I think what she's trying to say is that, like, how do I put this, like the reason that like streaming caused such an issue with SAG-AFTRA and with the WGA is that they weren't getting like the residual structure for streaming was extremely different from the residual structure for broadcast and other like forms of content delivery, and that meant that like WGA and SAG-AFTRA got a raw deal. And the analogy would be in cloud streaming, licensing out games for streaming at deals that are worse than publisher or platform deals for just selling the game. And that was kind of the worry that the CMA raised with cloud streaming and why they opposed the deal. That it would cause, I mean, this is not exactly the issue they rose. The issue they pointed out was that Microsoft didn't have competition in
the
cloud streaming, and they're raising it on the consumer side, which I think is not the argument they should have focused on. They should have focused on exactly the analogy to the SAG-AFTRA and WGA situation, which is the buyer side, the monopsony power that Microsoft would have in this.
Yeah, because Microsoft doesn't care if you
this area.
stream it, if you Game Pass it, whatever, as long as you're the one putting the money through the system, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's much, like, on the buyer side, you know, people have entertainment options other than cloud streaming. I don't think that was really the issue, and I found it weird that it was on the consumer side that the CMA focused. But, like, on the buyer side, the issue would be if they don't have, if you have a monopsonistic market, then you can squeeze your suppliers. In this case, the purveyors of video games and consequently the developers of video games. But I think that kind of gets the level of consolidation wrong in the sense that what enables Microsoft monopsony is not that Game Pass is built on top of Xbox as a platform. It's that Xbox is built on top of Azure and Microsoft's cloud infrastructure as a platform. You would have to separate the cloud infrastructure from the platform in order to break that link, which is a little too late to do. So we're kind of stuck with that.
But but even if it was cloud streaming through Sony, it's still Azure, right? I mean
that's kind of the problem, right?
Yeah.
That the same company that owns the cloud streaming platform also has platforms on top of it.
Yeah.
So if Microsoft were just a cloud services company and we're providing cloud services to Sony, to Amazon, and to a separate company called Xbox, then we could have a conversation about a monopoly in the cloud services market. A monopoly that doesn't exist,
right,
because there's also Google and AWS. But like that is not the situation we currently live in. The current situation we currently live in is one where Xbox runs exclusively on Azure. There's no like shopping around that Xbox has to do. They have preferential access to this cloud architecture. Anyway, back to what we're looking forward to.
But that was my big splash. That was my not necessarily. I don't think the game itself, but I think that's going to be a seismic shift when it finally kind of dawns on everybody. Oh wow, here we are. The other one I could really see kind of being on that splash that all of a sudden everybody is playing it, or it's like blowing up on streaming, or just kind of like taking a lot of like the attention out, but maybe not the game itself, is going to be Thirsty Suitors. I've got a feeling about that game. So? There's something about it. Yeah.
I think I could see a bit of that, like streamer bait, where people are kind of like excited by like how goofy and weird and like idiosyncratic it is. Like it looks quirky.
Yeah, and it's got that look of something where like it's gonna stream well. It's gonna be like it looks like it's got a lot going on. It's a very cool aesthetic. I could see it kind of popping up there. Something that people are actually interested in as far as indie games go.
You know what I think is going to make it like good stream bait? I think they're going to be a lot like the dialogue is going to have a lot of like clapbacks,
exactly,
and like really good burns, and that's a good opportunity for a streamer to go, "Oh shit!"
React. That's where it is. It's that React content, right?
Yeah. Yeah, they're like pulling the PogChamp face.
Yeah. The skateboarding aesthetic looks really cool. It's a neat looking game. I think it's going to kind of pop for a lot of people in a lot of ways. So that's one I think is going to maybe like on a dark horse kind of like hard to pick. I think that's going to be another one that's probably going to make a splash.
All right. Yeah, I think it could. I think it could be a game that actually makes a splash. In terms of what what I'm looking forward to, what I think will make a splash. So I'm also looking forward to Starfield. I'm also looking forward to Avatar. I'm looking forward to The Invincible, which is like this narrative first-person adventure, kind of Firewatchy, by some ex CD Projekt devs. It looks really neat. It's actually based on, in keeping with CD Projekt having Polish inspirations for The Witcher. This is based on the works of the Polish sci-fi author Stanisław Lem. So we'll see how that comes out. And the other thing I'm looking forward to, because I'm a Yakuza boy, I love Yakuza games, Like a Dragon Gaiden, The Man Who Erased His Name.
It is.
I'm not like super psyched they're bringing Kiryu back. His story's completed. Come on, let him rest. But also Agent style, the new fighting style they're introducing. We're using all sorts of like Bond-esque gadgets. That looks really dope.
Wasn't there something that just came out this week too, where they kind of were like, "Yeah, his story is over now," and a lot of people were like, "But is it really?" I was reading something.
I mean, he's in Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth.
Yeah.
He's one of the two main characters. So like, I hope it's over then.
Yeah.
Because I'm not down with his K-pop haircut, but if he's gonna retire to Hawaii, cool.
Yeah.
Let him retire in peace.
You gotta eventually let those characters go to a place that makes sense in the ending, even if it doesn't sell the whole fan base on something. But yeah, how many more years can you play with them?
Look, Frodo eventually hopped on that ship.
Yeah.
right? Just put Kiryu on a barge.
Yeah.
Put him out to sea.
He's got infinite
Life of
wealth
Pi
now.
that shit.
Let
Come
him
on.
spend it.
Exactly. He will have infinite wealth by that point. I mean, I don't know how far money goes when you're on a raft on the ocean,
Yeah.
but like tossing coins to the fish, making it rain for the eels.
That's the wealth. See, like your wealth and like you're rich in spirit. You've given away all your
Exactly.
possessions. So you've
Much
moved
like
on.
Piscine Militar Patel.
Yeah.
I think he'll be rich in spirit. All right. Enough Life of Pi jokes. I mean, okay. More analogies here. Kiryu has wrestled with a tiger.
Yeah, he has.
He is basically Pi Patel.
Yeah, he's done it all.
Come on.
He's like Homer Simpson at this point, like no matter what, he's got some kind of weird specialization in something. So
Exactly. Like, he's like 2 steps away from being like, wait, you've been to space? You haven't? Oh man, I just love for like Kiryu to run into like Frank Grimes.
yeah,
Because he wouldn't even be like, I think Kiryu is the version of Homer Simpson that would turn Frank Grimes good.
that'd be awesome.
Yeah, so that's what I'm looking forward to. As for what I think will make a big splash, obviously Starfield. I think everyone's going to be talking about Starfield when it drops in a little over a week. I think everyone's going to be talking about Spider-Man when it drops. And Super Mario Brothers is going to make a huge splash because this is the year of Mario. I wish it were still the year of Luigi. In my mind, the year of Luigi never ended. But this is the year of Mario.
Yeah.
And we're going to get some Mario.
It is Mario's year.
As far as smaller games that might make kind of a disproportionate impact, I think Lies of P is going to hit really big for the Souls sickos. I think they're going to love it. I think they're going to like their little Timothée Chalamet kind of knockoff Pinocchio.
Because they've got Armored Core right now, right? They've
they got Armored Core.
Lords of the Fallen coming up, which is...
I don't think they're going to like
You don't
Lords
think
of the
so?
Fallen.
Because I think you're going to...
I think that game's going to... That's a sequel. It's called the same thing
Yeah,
as the first game. They're trying to Weezer this shit. Come on. You can't do that.
I'm not sure.
That game is going to flop like a fish.
Yeah, I don't know. I would pick one of those two is going to. That's what I'll say. It's either going to be one of the two, but I don't know which one. I'm not into the Souls world enough to tell you which one it's going to be. So you might be...
Oh, I don't like Souls games at all. I've just seen that Lies of P.
Yeah.
Life of P. I'm conflating Life of Pi and Lies of P now. Put Timothée Chalamet on a barge. Let's see how he survives.
The title of the episode. Put Timothée Chalamet on a barge.
But yeah, I think people are really into Lies of P.
Yeah.
It's the biggest Bloodborne knockoff you've seen in your life, but I'm down with edgy Pinocchio.
Yeah.
Let's make it happen. Let's let this little boy slice and dice his way through. I guess this is Victorian England. That's not where Pinocchio is set. Pinocchio is set in Italy, but he sliced and diced his way through Victorian England because why not? And the other game I think that's a small game that's going to make a big splash is Sea of Stars. I think people love Chrono Trigger. I think they love Chrono Trigger homages. I think they're going to really dig this. I'm not just saying this because I'm Canadian and this is a game made in Quebec. I'm saying this because I think it's really going to pop off. All right. Wasp, what do you think is going to make a big splash?
I mean, other than Spider-Man 2, which is going to suck up a lot of the critical oxygen when it comes out. Because like, how could it not? Even if it's just Miles Morales, but more, it's still going to be one of the better games of the year.
One of my predictions at the start of this year, and I think I'm going to be wrong on it, but I'm hoping I'm right just so I can like stick it in Kappa's face, is that Marvel Spider-Man 2 is going to be like the top game of the year contender next to Tears of the Kingdom. I think that prediction is completely wrong at this point. Because like Baldur's Gate 3 has made such a huge splash, and Starfield's going to make a huge splash. So
I think part of it is
I'm probably wrong with that, but I hope I'm.
I think
not
superhero fatigue is kind of becoming real, and it's kind of blending into games too a little bit. That Marvel game, that should not have flopped that hard, regardless. And then I don't know. I mean, like,
Are you talking about Avengers?
no, the
Midnight
Knights.
Suns.
Yeah, Midnight Suns.
Midnight Suns, yeah. I just don't think they knew how to sell that
Yeah.
game because like people thought it was like a card-based game. There are cards, but it's really XCOM except for your attacks are cards.
I'm just thinking
they really should have.
they should have sold it that way, yeah. But I'm just thinking from the perspective of my own experience with the Batmans, right? Where I loved 1, I was okay with 2, and I was fucking sick of it by 3, right? I don't know that that's going to hit.
Is 3 Origins or Night?
I think Night, right?
Night was the 4th, but Origins wasn't made by Rocksteady.
Yeah.
It was made by WB Montreal.
That's kind of my thinking. So I don't know that people are going to be totally done with Spider-Man, but I can see people having a little fatigue at this point where every other year now they're getting a Spider-Man game. I don't know. I mean, I guess
I think it'll pop off, but I think
it'll sell.
I don't think it's gonna have generalized hype. I think people are gonna like it as a video game because I think it's gonna work as a video game, but I don't think it's gonna get like that big superhero bump,
I think it'd be tough. I think only from the perspective of PS5 is going to have something to really push, right? So everybody else is playing Starfield and everything else. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, like it's releasing the same day as Super Mario Brothers Wonder for the Switch, and that game is going to pop off. Like I think no matter what you think about the current state of 2D Mario, that game is going to sell. I don't know that the audience is necessarily the same as Marvel Spider-Man, but there probably is a pretty big overlap. A lot of people own both a Switch and a PS5.
Yeah. I'd say there's a huge overlap because Spider-Man, especially Miles these days, are such kid-appealing characters. Like, my 3-year-old nephew loves Miles Morales. That's his favorite superhero. But, like, the Mario audience and the Spider-Man audience are more often than not the same kids.
I agree. And, I mean, it's tough. I mean, I think PS5's gonna have to push it hard. I just don't know if it's gonna get that kind of juice, like Game of the Year type talk that, all the other ones
that I predicted.
Yeah. Well, I think the other thing that's kind of hard about it is it's up against some pretty action heavy stuff. Like it's Assassin's Creed is in there.
Mirage is coming out this fall.
Yeah.
Which is bringing the action to Iraq.
Yep, and then you've got the Metal Gear collection and Alone in the Dark. So a lot of that kind of action-heavy October, that kind of feels like a throwback a little bit too. Where you'd get like those real like actiony, thrilling games right in October, and then November's your more system movers, your system sellers. You get it, sell it for Christmas. Yeah,
like you're getting Sonic, you're getting Mario, you're getting Ghost Runner in October, and then November is like, like your more contemplative games, your Like a Dragons, your Persona 5 Tactica, Super
your
Mario
WarioWare.
Oh yeah, WarioWare. That's gonna be. I don't know if that's gonna hit, but like I don't think Get It Together hit that well.
WarioWares rarely hit in terms of mass appeal, but they always like get their niche audience, and then they sell enough to be like Nintendo's version of an indie game when they're not jacking up with indie studios.
Yeah, like the Switch is been such a huge seller that's hard for Nintendo to have a real flop with it at this point. Like I don't think they're going to get another Daemon X Machina anytime soon. So, like, yeah, I think it'll do fine. In a year that were a lot less stacked, I'd be interested in it. But like, there's no way.
Yeah,
time for it. So.
This feels like the olden times. Like we talked a lot about like the COVID, days and years and stuff. And it felt like it took a while to get the gears turning again. But I'm legitimately getting that like fall feeling I used to always get, like there is so much to play and so little time to play it, which is good. I love that feeling. I like being excited for games and stuff. It just felt like for a while it was like, there's one game to look forward to and then it's going to get delayed anyway. Who cares, But now, no, there's a lot to be excited for, and there's a lot of, it's that kind of excitement across a big spectrum. I mean, you've got an XCOM game, you've got Mortal Kombat, you got that weird Payday. People are into that shit. There's just a lot out there.
But what game are you talking about? That's XCOM. You're talking about
Lamplighters.
League,
Yeah,
or
Lamplighters. It's
yeah.
If I'm not wrong, it's by Harebrained, right? Which is
I
Shadowrun.
believe so. They did. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that game looks like I would definitely be playing that in a year that weren't so stacked. I don't know if I'll have time for it this year, but I love that whole like old adventure serial aesthetic.
That combined on top of the guys who made Shadowrun, and Shadowrun was excellent. I mean, that talking about earlier, that CRPG revival, Shadowrun was on the vanguard of that, and that game gets forgotten a lot. But that is an excellent game. The dialogue and story in that game is fantastic, and they had to really kickstart that thing. That wasn't like a kickstart as a pre-order. That was like, if this shit doesn't make the money, we're not making it.
Yeah. Wasp, sorry, what were you saying?
Also say Shadowrun Hong Kong was also really good.
Mm-hmm.
The MMO spin-off they did was I think it was like Boston Lockdown. That was very mid, but like the two CRPGs they made have been great. If you want a retro
they did
game,
Returns, Hong Kong, and Dragonfall,
yep.
right? Those are the three they did. Those are games that I wish I had the time to play.
Yeah.
I think I even own them. I just never got around to them.
I kickstarted them, and I've got like all the little. But I'm very optimistic for Lamplighters League, more for the setting combination with that gameplay, because I'm a little more into that 30s throwback adventure than I am Cyberpunk, which I don't have a problem with Cyberpunk. It's just sometimes like the way they talk about stuff, it gets a little cringy to me. Like, oh man, you got to get the better than life chip down jacked into your cyber frame. Okay, whatever. So
one of the really funny things about like the way people talk in Cyberpunk, or if you're wondering why they talk that way, it's because William Gibson, who's arguably one of the fathers of modern cyberpunk, he spent like the late 70s hanging out with like washout hippies and like techies and nerds in Toronto, and they all had this like really weird slang, and then that slang made its way into his novels, and that just kind of influenced how people talked in cyberpunk from then on. So if you're wondering why people in cyberpunk novels in like games talk the way they do, it's because William Gibson hung out with hippies in Toronto in the 70s.
It shows. It shows. I gotta get into a Ripper doc.
Yeah, it's all like Canadian 70s slang. Yeah.
So yeah, but that's a combination I'm really looking forward to for it. That setting combined with the game studio, I think is a real good mix. But Mortal Kombat 1, I mean, I know it's not maybe the fighting community's favorite, but I love ripping the faces off. And
I think that's gonna hit big.
Yeah,
this is the year of the fighting game.
Yeah, I was watching a couple streamers playing it, and they were doing it as an ad. And one of like the little things I watch for is after the ad ends, do they keep playing the game? And a lot of them kept playing it, and that's a good sign. And there's something about it that probably feels more comfortable, like casual wise, than it does like hardcore fighting community. Looking for frames to do whatever, but. Calling your little buddy in to go throw a knife or something feels really cool.
Yeah.
My one thing is I hope this time they didn't give the devs PTSD having to animate real names.
Yeah.
Like those reports were wow.
Where the
like
chunk
the game
of
is
bone
good,
goes and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm hoping that they kind of figured a way to keep what makes Mortal Kombat, but like, not traumatize the dev team. So let's look at the other side of the coin.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many games coming out in the fall, and they can't all be hits, right? Like, what do you think's just not gonna make a dent?
I mean,
Oh.
besides Sonic, I think we're all on the same page there. You can't put that shit against Mario, right? I think mine's probably going to be Alan Wake 2.
You don't think Alan Wake 2 is gonna
I don't
hit?
think it will. I think it
That's
should.
disappointing.
I just don't think it's gonna. I think Remedy's in a weird
no.
spot right now, and I think people love or hate it. And I just think there's so much strong competition out right now. I don't know. I
will say at least it's kind of got the week to itself.
Yeah. I mean, you got Alone in the Dark
out.
the week before though for that horror.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love Alan Wake, but I think I'm buying Alone in the Dark first because that it's such
tough,
a
right?
more unique thing to me.
Yeah.
This is the horror game OG coming back for to try to do a Resident Evil remake thing.
I think it'll sell well because of Control. I think Control sold pretty well, right?
Yeah. I think it did.
I just don't know that it's gonna hit the way that Remedy games never really seem to. It'll review well. It'll get critical praise, but I don't know that it's gonna be that big hype feeling game that Remedy kind of feels like they deserve, but never really have gotten.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
And then, so I think that one, and then I think so. I mean, Mario for sure, or not Mario, Sonic, Alan Wake, and then I think the other one that's going to just kind of get lost in the shuffle of hey, there's just too much out is going to be Endless Dungeon. I'm not huge on the Endless series. I don't know anybody who really where that's their preferred 4X game, but this is a twin stick shooter. And I don't think it has anything to do with anything. So I think it's it's based off of Dungeons of the Endless, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know why it's kind of getting a sequel that's getting hyped. But that hard version of a tower defense game, it just doesn't seem fun. But I know that this was originally going to be, I think it was announced a long time ago. I want to say a long time, but people loved the first one. I just don't know that this has the people who remember what it was. And 4-player co-op is really tough to do these days. Just getting people to do it,
You mentioned that this game was announced a long time ago. I thought it was already out.
Yeah.
I was really surprised to see it on the list when I was preparing the agenda. But I guess it's just something that people have been talking about on and off for the past God knows how long.
I was trying to think
5,
of when
6 years.
Dungeon of the Endless came out, 2014, and it was a legitimate, people kind of went nuts for it, right? It was kind of like that sleeper indie hit with all that stuff going on. It's just I don't know that people are going to remember that it's part of a series at this point, and instead it's going to be a 4-player co-op shooter. That's tough. I mean, I don't know. And then it's they're hyping up the difficulty. So who knows?
That's never a good sign.
I know. I want my twin stick shooters to.
If you're from software.
Yeah. I just.
Yeah.
I think this is kind of like one of those if people do remember Endless, Dungeon of the Endless, it's kind of like there was a weird 2014, 2015 phase where. What was that Gungeon? When did that come out?
Enter the Gungeon? Let me look that up. Enter the Gungeon came out in 2016.
There you go. So there was that kind of window where this felt like a lot of people were doing these kind of things. But I just don't know that 10 years later is going to still have that kind of feel.
Yeah. We'll see. I don't have super high hopes, but I wouldn't be surprised if it found an audience and that was a success for Amplitude. We'll see.
Yeah, the other one that was out at the same time. I think might have been FTL, right? It was era, and then was it roguelite or roguelike? I can't remember, but yeah, this was the only one I saw on the list, and I was like, wow, I can't believe that's not out yet, and I can't believe it's coming out still. That's kind of surprising to me, but I could see that one kind of being like, okay, well, little late on that one.
Yeah, for sure. Wasp, what do you think's gonna flop?
Flop? Well, there's no way that Return to Moria after the debacle that
Oh,
was
Gollum.
Life of White Gollum is going to do anything but make people
Oh yeah,
like they're
people are
probably
scared of loader games right now.
they're probably completely different studios, but it doesn't matter. The brand has been tainted in video games.
I mean, the other problem is that it looks like Deep Rock Galactic but without guns.
I,
So it looks like Deep Rock Galactic but with less gameplay.
I really thought this would have been a survival builder, but the more and more I've seen of it, the less and less excited I've gotten to it. Honestly, I wish they would have said it in Glimmerdeep personally, as like a fan of like that lore, because in the series Glimmerdeep, the area basically behind Helm's Deep where they all escape through, Gimli is deeded that to like basically make a home for dwarves in the Glimmerdeep. Though that would have been a little bit more cool than like building in an area that's already been built up. But it also doesn't look like a survival or building game anymore. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but I don't know. I think Deep Rock is probably the best comparison, though.
Yeah, and Deep Rock has its niche.
Yeah.
People like that game, and if you're not substituting the shooting with something more interesting, you're not going to get those people to play Return to Moria.
Yeah.
No.
So yeah, it's unfortunate. Completely agree, Wasp. I think it's going to flop. Anything else you think is going to flop, or you super confident the rest of this fall slate?
I want to see what happens between the Crew Motorfest and Forza Motorsport. Like, I like both of those games because I'm that weird person who's like, yeah, these car sims are fun. I like just driving and racing without any action in them. But like, I don't.
Oh, that's totally fine. There are a lot of people like you.
I don't feel like there's room for more than two. Like, you can get whatever the Xbox main one is. Oh, that's Forza. You can get like Forza and Gran Turismo, but then maybe if Motorfest, one of them has to go, is what I think.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I would probably lean towards Forza too if I had to pick. Only because I think the big problem with the Crew all along is that they really pump that online, play with other people, drop in, drop out multiplayer. I'm not sure that people are as into that as they seem to think. Generally speaking, I don't like racing against other people. It's kind of weird.
I will say, I think Forza has a much stronger brand than the Crew. Let's not forget, the first Crew did not hit very well, and people did not like it very much. I don't know how well the Crew 2 was received, but I think Ubisoft, to their credit, probably went back to the drawing board a little bit for Motorfest, and is trying to genuinely make something different. But Ubisoft is also a mess these days, and I'm not sure they're capable of putting out the kind of product that can compete with Forza Motorsport. They have 1 month of lead time here, so maybe people will get really into the Crew and won't want to jump ship for Forza Motorsport when it comes out, but I just don't think it's going to hit to begin with.
Didn't Ubi also do something with their racing games, and they combined it all into some... What is the name of that game? There was like some...
Trackmania?
Was that? Where it was like, it's basically like all their extreme games, jumping off of cliffs and racing boats and cars.
Oh, Steep.
Steep, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, that didn't have cars. That had like
everything but,
dirt bikes and snowboards and things like that. Sorry, it wasn't Steep, it was Riders Republic. Steep was the predecessor.
Yeah, so Riders Republic combined a couple things with Steep, I think.
Yeah, like it combined some of like the snowboarding gameplay from Steep, and then added in BMX and skateboarding, and a couple of other things. But yeah, I think that model could work, but that's not like that's more of a Forza thing than a crew thing. I think a crew is pretty much pure cars. Forza Horizon will let you Forza Motorsport would. Forza Horizon will let you mess around with stuff, but Motorsport is pretty like serious car sim.
Yeah, I just think it's
so it might be that they're serving different audiences. The crew will serve the Forza Horizon audience. Forza Motorsport will serve the Gran Turismo audience, and maybe they won't eat each other alive. We'll see. But yeah, it's hard to know. As for what I think will flop, that Eternites game is getting a level of promotion that I don't think the actual quality of the game can hold up to. I don't think that game is going to be good. I think people will reject it and it's going to flop. I don't understand how like this ecchi dating sim / hack and slash is getting so much mainstream attention. I don't know. Like, do the developers have some dirt on Jeff Keighley or something? I am floored that this game is getting the attention it's getting. I don't understand. I don't know. Maybe people have gone hands-on with it, and it's actually fantastic, and it's being a prejudiced little jerk, and when it actually comes out, it'll be fantastic. I will eat crow. I will eat a literal crow if this game is good. There are lots of crows in my neighborhood. Yeah. It's feasible.
I'll eat a crow too if that happens, because I don't see... Like, there's the dating sim audience, and then there's the hack and slash audience, and in between there's the monster fetish audience, but I don't think that's big enough for Eternites to have any, like...
I mean, I think I think you're right, but for the reason that the Venn diagram overlap of those two groups is actually a pretty big overlap, so it's not that many people in the audience. Like, I think...
You know, when I kind of thought this was a little bit weird was when they first started pointing out that, like, all the characters in this game are 18. I just thought that was a little weird. Like, there's, like, an anti-aging drug in it, right? And they're like...
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly where I saw, but it was, like, the main character is 18, and also all the other characters are 18. Like, I was like, okay, I see what we're doing.
Like... Come on.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, man. Like what you like. I'm not here to judge, but if you've got to put the 18 disclaimer, you know, maybe slowly roll a little bit.
Not exactly the...
Your shirt is raising plenty of questions, as you thought your shirt already answered.
Exactly.
What was...
I would have assumed they were adults. Why do you got to point it out? You know, why do you got to make it weird?
There was something with... I think people have liked that idea behind like Harvest Moon or Stardew Valley, or like just in general building romances into things where it adds to kind of like an otherwise kind of straightforward game. I wonder if that's kind of what this was. Maybe this felt like a very flat anime-ish hack and slash, and they're like, well, what if you can date, you know, the characters? Would that add enough to get you through it? But you got to remember, you got to play the action parts the rest of the time, you know?
I mean, if the action's good, I don't need the dating.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you could throw a bunch of waifus in there as my companions. Cool. I'm down for that. If you make the hack and slash gameplay good, that sounds like a good time to me. Now, if you're telling me I'm going to date these girls, and also, trust me, bro, they're all 18, I'm suddenly... like inundated with questions in my mind.
You trust me, bro. She's actually a 5 million-year-old dragon.
She just looks 16. Yeah. I could see that being a flop. And so but we also kind of were between Lords of the Fallen and Lies of P. That'll be the Merve versus Kappa real test of where the flop's going to end up.
I think, unlike me having way too high expectations for Marvel Spider-Man 2, I think this is the one where I'll come out on top. The other game that I think will unfortunately flop, because I want good things for Dontnod. I think they do interesting things. I don't think Banisher's Ghost of Eden is going to hit.
No, going nowhere.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't play Harmony: The Fall of Reverie earlier this year. I feel bad because I like what Dontnod does, but I only have so many hours in the day, and I couldn't make time for that game. So
I remember they kind of very publicly said that they didn't want to do more stuff like Life is Strange, and I remember that like at the time being like, okay, they don't know where they want to go, right? Because Tell Me Why was kind of Life is Strange, right? Life is Strange was kind of their big thing.
I mean, Tell Me Why was fantastic. If they could make games like that and just keep making games
but I'm not saying it's exactly Life is Strange, but it's kind of in that same like region, right?
Yeah.
And then I feel like they wanted to make more stuff like Vampire, but that game sucked, And then it was a vampire game and it sucked. Get it? But
womp,
they
womp.
really, it felt like they were really like trying to be like, yeah, we want to do big things. We want to make, But I don't know. I wonder a lot about that if they're just kind of aiming, looking for where they're gonna kind of fit in. But I agree. I don't know about this one.
Yeah, I think Harmony tried to iterate on that formula. I don't know if it hit as hard as something like the Life is Strange games or Tell Me Why, both of which I think were fantastic. I think they also want to do stuff more like their debut game, like Remember Me.
This looks very Remember Me, by the way. I agree.
I'm a Remember Me defender. I think Remember Me was Hi-Fi Rush before Hi-Fi Rush. But like that is... I am very much alone in that opinion.
Let me ask you this. I know, like, I don't want to get super stereotypical here or anything, but do you feel like there's just something with French studios where they always have that feel like they're trying to transcend. They're trying to be something that's more than, just a game. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but I thought Dontnod had a really solid area carved out. I don't know the twist going towards these more actiony games. I liked their weird character dramas. I thought they were great, and then I don't know why you would give that up to kind of make generic-y actioners, action RPGs. Just I don't know.
I mean, if they can come up with a unique sorry, go ahead, Wasp.
I would say, because Life is Strange felt like a David Cage game, but with competencies.
It felt realer.
Made by,
like they finally
made by someone who knows what they're doing.
Yeah. And then this one, I don't know. Like from what I've seen, it's just very, I don't know. One person can see ghosts and one person can shoot guns, and I feel like I've played that game before. I haven't maybe, but I feel like I have. So where I felt like everything about Life is Strange and Tell Me Why felt completely new. Like, okay, I've never seen anything like this before.
Yeah, how many games are set in small town Alaska and are about like a trans man and his twin sister reuniting after a long time spent apart from each other? Like, that is a story that just isn't told in media, let alone video games, right? So, like, I really wish we could get more of that unique storytelling out of Dontnod, because they do it so well. If they want to layer it on top of action RPG gameplay, fine, but the premise and the hook have to be strong for me to be
I agree.
really interested in it. The other game that I think is unfortunately going to flop, I don't think the Detective Pikachu sequel is going to hit. I think that's going to be the Nintendo's fall flop. I think people like the first Detective Pikachu. I think people like the movie, but I think this sequel, which was announced forever ago, does not have a lot of hype behind it and is going to get lost in the fall shuffle.
That's kind of my thinking on mine too. Sometimes timing is so important, right? Like,
oh yeah, like if this had come out last year, I think it would have hit.
And I know that Pikachu and Pokemon, all their fans aren't kids exclusively, right? But you think about a kid who saw and loved Detective Pikachu at 10, he's 15 now. You know what I mean? And it's just, you know what I mean?
Long ago.
Like, was it? So I don't know. Was it that long ago? I feel like it was, right? 2017?
It was 2019.
2019. Okay, so
yeah, the kid would be 14 now.
Well, but still, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, if you're in the wheelhouse at 11, 12, and now you're 15, 16, I don't know. I feel like a lot of this stuff you got to strike when that iron is hot, right? And I don't know. I don't know if Detective Pikachu is gonna do that. Is this one based on all of the movie, or is it just it's based on the sequel to the game?
It's a sequel to the first game,
Okay.
but I believe part of the plot of the movie is kind of loosely based on part of the plot of the first game. I don't know much about Detective Pikachu. I've
Wow,
only seen
this
the
was
movie.
announced in 2019. Wow.
And that was the same year as the movie. I watched that movie at the Chinese theater in LA.
It was a pretty fun movie. I liked it. Yeah.
I like that was 2 cities ago for me. Yeah, that was. So I remember vividly my experience watching that film because I saw it in their version of the 4D theater, which is different from the ones that Regal does or that AMC does. So they have jets underneath the seats, just like 4D theaters elsewhere,
nice.
except for their jets were calibrated to shoot out way too high a pressure of air. So, like, anytime they sent out puffs of air, it would legitimately feel like someone was slapping the back of my ankles. It hurt so bad. I have no idea how they got away with it. Yeah, like, and then I look at my legs when I get home from the movie theater, and they're like red welts on the back of my legs from this freaking movie.
That is wild.
That's 5D now.
Yeah, like you'll like the fifth dimension is the time it'll take for your wounds to heal. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I unfortunately don't think Detective Pikachu Returns is going to hit. I think what might have made it hit better is if they'd ported the 3DS game to the Switch. But like, a sequel to a game you can't even play on Switch or any like currently supported Nintendo platform, I think it's a little bit of a dicey proposition.
What surprised me was Nintendo ported Famicom Detective Club to Japan-only adventure games, kind of like Detective Pikachu, like loosely, but they never ported Detective Pikachu 1, even when the movie was out. Like 2019 Switch era, that would have, you could have just sold that as a movie tie-in game and it would have done fine, but they never thought to do that.
I think this is an instance where, like for those who don't know, Pokemon is effectively managed by 4 different companies. Nintendo's has a say, Game Freak has a say, Creatures has a say, and they all have this a share in this company called the Pokemon Company, which also has a say. So if the Pokemon Company doesn't want to do something, even if Nintendo wants them to, sometimes it doesn't get done. And this might be an instance of the Pokemon Company having too much on their plate to manage that particular port.
Well, let me ask you this. You're probably more in touch with like the Switch culture, I guess, than I am. Do you think it's like a 1 or 2 game fall no matter what for Nintendo Switch people? Like, are they only going to get, are they going to choose between Pikachu and Mario, you think? Or is it just, if it's good enough, they're going to get it?
I just think they're going to get Mario, and they're like, Detective Pikachu isn't going to even be
Okay, that's what so it's
I think you're going to buy Mario, and then you're going to buy Mario RPG, and then you're going to be like me and you haven't bought Zelda yet, so you buy Zelda, and then Detective Pikachu doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's like not even on the radar. Like if you're buying a game from earlier in this year, it's going to be Zelda, maybe Pikmin, maybe Fire Emblem if that had been received a little better. But yeah, I don't think these people are even going to be looking at Detective Pikachu.
Okay.
Which is a shame because I think it's charming. And I'd like to see more like adventure games from Nintendo and the Pokemon Company.
What I think we'll be interested to kind of keep an eye on too is going to be Payday 3. I don't I feel like people did enjoy it, but at some point, all those DLCs and add-ons and $2, $4, $5 things, I got more sick of that game than anything else. And I wonder what the kind of feels out there about Payday as a series are.
As someone who got in on Payday 2 pretty close to the ground floor and has seen it evolve from game to effectively a platform,
Yeah.
it's a change that to me became really hard to deal with because like you went from Payday, which was extremely straightforward, to Payday 2, which has these really complicated progression systems, and you can't tell whether you have to pay for something or not pay for something. Like my co-op group never really glommed onto it. We played a few rounds of it, and then like it just never became a thing that we really did day in day out. We instead moved on to Left 4 Dead mods.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was in high school when 2 came out, and my buddies, we played a couple rounds, and then we went back to, like, dinking around in Team Fortress 2 still, so...
It's a really...
Makes perfect sense.
It's such an interesting fall, though, with all these little options out there for people if, like, if you really just want to dive into something. There's something for you, and I feel like this is the first fall in a while where I felt like that. Like it's not just like some stuff for like the AAAs and some stuff for the indies. There feels like a little bit of everything.
Yeah, it's kind of running the whole gamut of what's there in gaming. One last question I want to ask you folks. I've heard a lot of chatter, like I listen to a lot of gaming podcasts, that 2023 is bound to be the best year ever in video games.
Oh man.
What do you like? That's a tall order, right? What do you make of that?
I think it's going to be a top year for sure. I think you can't just look at what happened earlier this year and forget how good it's been. I think if you were a Zelda fan, especially, this is the best year. This is going to be one of the best years because you had Zelda to start out with, and then it's just basically been nonstop RPG, action RPG, those types of games from there on out. If you didn't like Zelda, I think that's going to be the make or break it because that was a widely reviewed and loved game. But yeah, I think this is going to be ending up kind of one of those years everybody remembers, and you're going to have a favorite from that year no matter what you like because so many different great games came out in different genres.
Wasp, what do you think?
I definitely think it'll go down as an all-timer. Especially because a lot of the delayed games from the pandemic are coming out now, and they got polished and stuff, and so, like, you're getting the Zeldas, you're getting Mario, there's shooters for, like, whatever flavor of shooter you like. Like, boomer shooters have come back now. So, like, if you like...
Oh, yeah, there have been so many this year.
In fighting games,
you've gotten a
Street Fighter and a Mortal Kombat in the same year, and both look great. That's pretty wild.
Yeah. And Tekken 8's coming early next year. And to go back to boomer shooters, like we've gotten that Warhammer one that was super well received. Slayer's X, if you want kind of a parody boomer shooter. Turbo Overkill has hit really big. Sulaco is going to be coming out soon, I think. Like it has been a big year for that genre, for throwback shooters. I'm really stoked.
The year started out weird because you had like the big bomb with Forspoken, right? And I think that was what everybody was excited for. But then in the meantime, everybody's playing Ninja Turtles and Hi-Fi Rush, right? So like it never felt like even when the big game flopped of that month, there was always something else to make up for it. And it hasn't felt like that for me in a long time, right? Like where the one game I was looking forward to, if it didn't hit, well, that was it for that month, and I mean, I didn't even play Hogwarts, that sucked all the air out of the room for months, right? So
yeah, that game has not had staying power.
No, absolutely not.
I am very happy it hasn't had staying power, but I also forgot it came out this year.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, in terms of like a game coming out that was that massive and is forgotten about, what is it, 6 months later? That's a good year.
Yeah.
That's a good year for games if you've forgotten, weirdly. But I mean, I wasn't playing it. Nobody else was that I knew really, but it was a huge game and I
Yeah,
wasn't playing it.
not touching that shit with a 10-foot pole.
Well, I wasn't playing it because I was
Um,
playing, like weird stuff like, I don't even know what I was playing at that time. Atomic Heart. I didn't like that much, but it was a cool game.
oh, that game.
Yeah.
That's bad.
But
No, okay. I wanna be fair to Atomic Heart. It's not. When I say it sucked, I don't mean it was an awful game. It was a bad game, but not like a
yeah, it's kind of
terrible game.
stylish,
You know what I mean?
but you know what I mean? But like you just always had an option if you didn't want to play the real big game of the month. And I think
Oh yeah.
that,
I'm looking at my list of played games this year. It's almost all
yeah,
indies. Um,
I have
I've
so
been
much,
eating well.
yeah, I have so much Pizza Tower played. I love Pizza Tower.
I got a lot of,
Oh, I've heard such good
yeah.
things.
I mean, just weird stuff comes along, and I'm like, okay, like why did this game take up all my, a whole month of gaming is into Vampire Survivors or whatever. Just name the game. It's just always been like there's something I've been enjoying. So, last year,
I've been trying to get people
Go ahead.
into. I've been trying to get people into some of the games I played this year. Like, I don't think I've been able to get anyone to play Backfire
Yeah.
Wall, and that game had like a lot of pre-release hype. It had trailers and everything. It was at like showcases, and in a like less stacked year, that would be like an indie highlight. And no one's talking about this utterly fantastic puzzle game.
That's me in War Tales. I was so hyped for War Tales. It looked so awesome. I was so excited. It was all right, but like that was the kind of game that would have consumed my year, and it's just because I've always was bouncing to the next one. A Settlers game came out this year. I completely forgot. Like it's weird.
I think Ubisoft also completely forgot about it.
They're like, what the hell?
They didn't promote that thing at
Yeah.
all.
So I mean, it's
Man.
a weird year. This last year felt so bad, and this year feels so good in a lot of ways that I think it's just kind of like it's like whiplash, like 2022 might have been maybe my worst year that I can think of in a long time, and I get why. I get it, but this one totally opposite. Like I just always felt like there was something else that even if I wasn't going to play it, I was interested in, or at least going to follow a little bit,
It's interesting you mentioned 2022 because I just looked at my top 10
Mhm.
and the gulf between my top 5 and 6 through
Yeah.
10 is immense.
Oh, yeah.
Like like my top 5 is Pentiment, Neon White, Norco, Xenoblade Chronicles 3, Kirby and the Forgotten Land. And then the next step down from that is Mutation.
Yeah.
A game that would wouldn't be in my top 10 of the year so far of 2023.
And like I still love Pentiment. Don't get me wrong. That would have made my top 10 any year it came out, right? But I don't know that it would have made my top 1. Like it was a great game for what it was, but it was still, kind of a indie game that had a story to tell and had some cool ways to do it, but it's just crazy that felt like the best we were getting that year, and then this year it's been kind of like shit.
Pentiment would probably be like, if it came out this year, it would probably be my number.
That's
2
what I would.
so far.
I think it's probably like a top 5 for me, easy, but somewhere in that 1 to 3 most likely. But I can see it being pushed out by stuff like Baldur's Gate or Starfield or lots of other things. It's just
Timing was great for Pentiment. Like if it would have came out, if it came out this year, it would have been like a cult hit.
It would have been buried.
yeah, it would have been
Yeah,
buried.
just-
Yeah, absolutely.
In a way, I think this is going to sound a little weird. I think Microsoft kind of dropping the ball last year in terms of major releases was a big boon to Obsidian as a studio.
Yeah.
Because it gave space for Pentiment, which built their reputation, and it gave space for. I think ultimately it's actually good in the long run for like those kinds of games to come out of Microsoft because it proved that these smaller titles can hit really big. Also, same with Hi-Fi Rush.
Yeah, Hi-Fi Rush is a
that
great
game
example.
being as good as it was, as polished and smooth as it was, I think really
And it was
proved that smaller titles can do really well for.
it was one of those
Xbox.
like style of like secret drops or whatever they used to call them, where it's like, hey, Shadow Drops. That's it. Yeah, here you go. Here's a new game, and like I think that really worked for that game because people went from like, have you heard of this game to like, this is the best game I've ever played overnight. So,
it is like it's the best action game I played this year, by a huge
felt
margin.
really kinetic and fun, and I mean,
fantastic.
Next year's looking good too. If half of these really can hit next year, I think we're in a nice little, 2-3 year span. Is Space Marine 2, is that still like a Q4 thing? That and that Star Wars game. I'm trying to think of what else.
Star Wars Outlaws is
next year for sure. Okay, I couldn't remember if that was end of the year or next year, but there's some good stuff on the horizon. I don't know what's going to end up happening with some of the purchases and stuff, but I'm fucking psyched. This has been a good year for gaming.
All right. On that note, anything else you'd like to mention about what you're looking forward to, what you think will be happening in fall of 2023?
Oh, well, besides the reboot of Metroid. No,
that game is already rebooted.
The only thing I think that this fall is really going to kind of reveal, I think, E3 dead at this point, right? Hype cycles all feel like they're all over the place. And like we said, we're back to your game not being the only game of the month. And you're going to have to really start getting that hype cycle kind of kicked in and going again, right? I'm going to be interested to see how all the studios start really selling them stuff now that Microsoft is it the biggest publisher on the planet now?
No. Sony as a platform still, by revenue, is much bigger.
So I mean, but you've got that heating up. You've got PC in the best spot ever. You've got Steam Deck getting some competition from Asus. There's just a lot going on right now. And I feel like you're going to have to start selling people a little bit more on you and your services and your games. And that usually ends up being super expensive for them, but it also leads us to getting a lot more deals. So curious to see where that goes.
Yeah, I think that once the dust clears, like after fall, like I think right now it's kind of heads down and just getting these games out the door. I think the real contest will be next year, when like companies can kind of like not reset the clock, kind of like reload their barrels and start really competing on like the feature sets and the libraries. I think right now everyone's really in get these games out the door mode. But next year I think will be interesting from that perspective for sure. All right. Sorry, Wasp, you were saying something?
Oh no, I just agreed with you. I said yeah right at the end there.
All right. On that note, I think it's time to call this episode to a close. If you would like to keep up to date with the podcast, please follow us. We have a website, avocadogamescast.wordpress.com. On that website, we post every episode. There's also a link dump so you can fact check some of the stuff we say. You can also subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify, or all three if you're feeling weird. All you have to do is search for Avocado Gamescast. Not a lot of podcasts called Avocado Gamescast, just this one. And please make sure you check out the community that spawned this podcast, The Avocado, at the-avocado.org. It's a wonderful community of people who talk not just video games, movies, music, books, television, all sorts of other pop culture. Sometimes we talk about food and history and all sorts of other fantastic stuff. So please check us out. We'd love to have you. Thank you so much to Wasp and the Kappa for joining me today. Wasp, how did it feel to podcast with us for the first time?
This was my first podcast ever, so I mean, I had fun. I hope I didn't ruin your show.
I mean, this is the podcast where we spent an hour talking about whale penises one time. I think you're good. Thank you all. Thank you to all our listeners. We will catch you next time. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.